Chapter 264. Numna tightened her grip on Amon's arm. I don't want you to be the one to fall. The gods who have transcended eternal life, in fact, as long as they do not get involved in these disputes, they will not lose their eternal life. Everyone understands this, but there are some things that cannot be avoided. I have a premonition that the war of the gods has begun, but I don't want to see it, so I don't want to think about it. Amon turned his wrist and held her hand. You don't want to think about it, but someone has to think about it. I'm afraid Anu has thought of this long ago, so he left the divine realm in that way and came to the human world. Although we don't know what he is doing, at least we know that he is trying his best. Numna, although Anu has left, the gods still have to abide by their oaths. If you take the initiative to attack Anunnaki's underworld, no matter whether the gods are willing to help Kella or not, they will not help you, not even me. And Amon held her hand in his palm and rubbed it. Of course I won't let you attack your sister's underworld with me, as long as you pass the news to the Anunnaki gods, you are already helping me. In fact, I have no intention of hurting Queen Kella herself, I just want to tear down her underworld. I hope she will understand something. There is one more thing I am curious about. Kella is your sister, but your relationship is very bad. How did you two become enemies? Numna bowed her head and said weakly, in fact, there are a lot of things I wanted to tell you, but I was afraid you would be angry. My sister and I are not enemies, but we did have a falling out. It was because of a man, and that was many years ago. Back then, Numna was really a troublemaker. Since Amon knew her, from Gilgamesh to Enkidu, and then from the Lion King to Dums, there had never been a lack of trouble. He had heard a lot of legends about this goddess, but he did not expect another one to pop up. Amon smiled bitterly and waved his hand. Forget it. If it's already in the past, don't talk about it. I don't want to hear it. Hearing Amon's displeased tone, Numna shrunk her shoulders and hid her head in his arms like a little girl. She said weakly, Are you angry? Of course, it's already in the past, but I still have to explain it to you clearly, because it involves another god. Numna recounted a story that happened hundreds of years ago, and it even involved a triangular relationship. The story began with the gods guiding the oracles. Except for people like Dums, who were guided by the gods from an early age because of their family background, most of the oracles were not born with the favor of the gods. They were all guided to become oracles because of their achievements or talents in a certain aspect. It was as if Batet was a cat with intelligence. It was not easy to cultivate the power of two sides to a high level, and the gods would not waste their time and energy in vain. They would only guide people or creatures with exceptional talent or aptitude. One of the simplest ways was to guide those who had already achieved great things in the mortal world. They were often very young and had the confidence to pass the various tests of the power of origin. In the traditional view, this kind of guidance was also a kind of gift. It meant that breaking through to a high level was not as simple as teaching them the path of cultivation, but also required a lot of energy. There were some people in the mortal world who, although extremely talented and outstanding, even the gods would be afraid of them, such as Gilgamesh or Enkidu, so the gods would not choose them as oracles. After all, the oracles were not only the descendants of the gods, but also the servants of the gods. Without the right guidance, it was difficult for those who had achieved great things in the mortal world to achieve the endless cycle, and in the end, it would be even more difficult for them to pass the judgment of fate. Hundreds of years ago, a very suitable talent appeared in the Assyrian kingdom. He was a young and handsome man named Nergal, and he attracted the attention of the Anunnaki gods. Kella took a fancy to him and decided to guide him to the power of the origin. As the queen of the underworld, she was a very terrifying existence in the mortal world, and Kella did not want to frighten this handsome man, so she disguised herself as a mortal girl and approached him. If one were to describe it in a vulgar way, Kella's method was also very old-fashioned. The young man actually lost his way in the middle of the night, and in the middle of the night, he stayed in a house with a light on. Surprisingly, there was only a young and beautiful girl living in that house. Nergal nervously explained that he had somehow lost his way at night, but he was not a bad person and only wanted to stay for the night before leaving at dawn. The girl warmly received him and brought him a chair, but Nergal politely did not sit on it. She brought him wine and meat, but Nergal gratefully refused. A girl living alone in such a remote place must not have had an easy life, and he did not want to enjoy the good things in her house. Later, when she brought him water to wash his feet, Nergal blushed and said no need for it. He did not want to disturb her rest, and there was no need for her to do so much for him. The next morning, when Nergal was about to leave, he found that the girl had already prepared a fire to cook, and was working hard to chop firewood in the backyard. Her figure was very beautiful, but the sight of her soft and tender hands wielding a chopper was very unbearable. Nergal stepped forward to help, but after chopping the firewood, he found that the girl did not have much firewood left. The girl told Nergal to eat breakfast, then sent him out and wished him a safe journey. Nergal, however, felt that he should not leave just like that. Since he had nothing else to do, why not help this kind girl? After leaving the house, he did not continue on his way. Instead, he drew his warrior's sword and went to the mountains to chop firewood. Only at dusk did he return with a large, neat bundle of firewood. He also hunted a few wild rabbits, and so he did not leave for the day. On the third day, it was time to leave, but as soon as he left the house, it began to rain cats and dogs. Nergal had no choice but to stay at the girl's house for the night. The beautiful girl was not annoyed by the strange guest's refusal to leave, and continued to receive him warmly. She brought out all of the delicious food in the house, and advised him not to rush. Since it was difficult to travel in the rain, it would be better to wait until the weather cleared up. The rain fell intermittently for 2 days, and on the fourth night, when he was sleeping, Nergal suddenly woke up because he felt cold water dripping on his body. It turned out that the roof was leaking. On the fifth day, the sky brightened, but Nergal did not leave. He could not leave the kind girl alone in the leaky house, so he cut down trees nearby and chopped them into thin planks, which he used to repair the roof. Just like that, another day passed, and the girl thanked him profusely. On the sixth day, Nergal climbed up to the roof and began to repair the house, while the girl stood below and handed him the planks. The two of them worked very well together, and it seemed as if they were in love. After a tiring day, they finally finished repairing the roof. The girl made a delicious dinner to thank this hero that they had met by chance, and Nergal finally drank. Tomorrow, he would have to leave, and for some reason, Nergal was very reluctant to leave. As the girl toasted, she said, "Thank you, my handsome hero. You have already wasted so many days for me, and you should be on your way tomorrow. Today, I am dirty and sweaty from repairing the roof. After dinner, I will boil some water for you. Take a good bath." The half-drunk Nergal also said, "I will boil the water. Carrying a large bucket of water is hard work. You are also sweaty today, you should take a bath as well." After eating and drinking, Nergal took out a set of clean clothes from his luggage and changed into them. His entire body felt indescribably comfortable. At this time, the girl began to bathe, but suddenly let out a scream. She had seen a worm crawl past the side of the wooden bucket. Hearing the scream, Nergal pushed aside the curtain and rushed to the girl's side. Then, he saw the beautiful girl stand up from the wooden bucket without a stitch on. He did not know what happened next, but he hugged her, kissed her, and touched her. She threw her arms around his neck and kissed him back passionately. Nergal carried the girl, who was still wet, into the house, and the two of them hugged each other on the bed. They lingered for a whole night. The girl was so beautiful, hardworking, and kind. Since they had already carried her to bed, their relationship was obviously different. Nergal decided to take her away and make her his bride. When he came to stay a few days ago, he did not expect to have such a fortuitous encounter. This girl was, of course, Kella. She had originally come to test the warrior, but the more she looked at him, the more she liked him. In the end, she even changed her mind, no longer just to guide an oracle. She was the one who took the initiative to seduce him. Nergal was an upright and honest man, but he was still a hot-blooded young man. When he got lost in the wilderness, he had a romantic encounter. He liked the girl too, and did not even think that it was a temptation. Nergal was going to discuss with the girl and ask her if she had any relatives in her family, and he wanted to take her away. Kella was also thinking about how to guide this young man's origin power in some way, so that he could become an oracle of the Anunnaki divine clan. However, before the two of them could say anything, on the 7th day, the girl's younger sister suddenly came. It was, of course, Murin. She came out of curiosity and mischievousness. The two sisters had once said that anyone could guide this warrior, but it was not easy to find a suitable candidate to guide a capable oracle. This could also be considered a small bet. Kella first appeared in front of Nergal, but then the situation changed. The queen of the underworld did not see Nergal as a simple oracle or servant, but really took a liking to him. When Murin came to visit, Kella could not immediately point it out, so she told Nergal that it was her younger sister. On this day, the three of them sat together for a meal, with two such beautiful girls by his side, and Nergal felt like he was in a dream. After a few more drinks, there were many topics to talk about. Nergal sighed. You two sisters are as beautiful as the goddesses in the legends. Kella smiled happily, but Murin took the opportunity to ask a question. Handsome warrior, have you seen a goddess? If a goddess came to the world to guide you, they would be Murin, the goddess of youth and love, and Kella, the queen of the underworld. Who would you choose? The poor young man did not know the truth, and looked at Kella drunkenly, and casually replied, of course it would be the goddess of youth and love. Before he finished speaking, Kella's expression changed, and with a stomp of her foot, she turned into a gust of wind and flew over the roof. According to the agreement between the gods, since Nergal had given such an answer, the one who would guide him would be Murin. Unless Murin agreed, Kella could no longer guide Nergal as her oracle. If Nergal had given such an answer when they first met, it would not have been a big deal even if Kella was unhappy. But now that they had come this far, how could Kella take it lying down when Murin made such a move? Goddess Murin didn't mean to snatch his love away. She just walked out of her competitive mentality and jokingly asked such a question. If Nergal was willing to accept Kella's guidance, there was no need for her to stop him. But the queen of the underworld had a bad temper. Since she was dissatisfied, she took it out on the spot and left. Nergal was frightened and could not understand what had happened. Murin quickly changed into the image of a god and explained to the horrified warrior what had happened. When Nergal came back to his senses, he realized that he had given the wrong answer. He wanted to go to Kella to explain, but the queen of the underworld no longer wanted to see him. This was how Kella and Murin first became hostile to each other. As for Nergal, Murin did not break her promise and still guided him to the power of the origin. Later, Nergal became a member of the Anunnaki through the trial of fate, the judgment of the last day, but Kella still did not see him. After listening to Numna's story, Amon did not know whether to laugh or cry. He frowned and said, Nergal is the god of the dead in the Anunnaki mythology. I always thought he had some kind of relationship with the queen of the underworld, Kella, but I did not expect it to be this kind of relationship. He turned out to be the divine emissary you guided and achieved transcendence and eternal life. It's been hundreds of years, has Kella never seen him? Numna lowered her eyes and said, it's not like you haven't experienced Kella's temper. Of course she didn't see Nergal for hundreds of years. Amon frowned and asked, then Nergal became the divine emissary you guided, and then he became a god who transcended eternal life, so you and him? Murin was a little uneasy and hurriedly explained, I knew you would not be happy to hear this story, but don't get me wrong, I have no other relationship with him, I only guided him to the power of the origin. Even because of this, I never sent Nergal on any mission. Amon finally smiled. What can I say about this? Kella's temper is indeed a bit bad. He is a god, and his temper lasts for hundreds of years. But you really shouldn't have done what you did. From a bystander's point of view, if you also liked that Nergal, it would not be wrong to test his heart, or to do something before Kella did. But knowing that the situation was like that, you still. Numna shook Amon's arm and interrupted him. Of course I know, I shouldn't have done it. That's why I didn't tell you. I knew you would be unhappy, but I still had to say it today. I just wanted to remind you. Nurgle has always been apologetic towards Kella, and if you attack the underworld, he will help Kella in a while. I guided him to become a god, and I can dissuade him in the divine clan, but I can't dissuade him from helping Kella because of this. But if I don't stop Nurgle from helping Kella, you will have to face him. This is really a dilemma. Nurgle was once the most brilliant master of necromancy in the world, and you may not be afraid, because I know that you have also received necromancy from Batet and know its secrets. But if your disciples meet Nurgle, I am afraid they will be difficult to deal with. The reason I told you about the past today is to ask what should be done. If you want me to persuade Nurgle not to interfere, I will do it now. Amon reached out and slapped her on the back. My goddess, don't get involved again. If Nurgle wants to help Kella, let him do it. I'm just a little curious. Since Nurgale's training was guided by you, and you're not skilled in necromancy, how did he become a necromancy master? Inanna explained, although Kella no longer saw Nurgle, he later asked Ea, the god of wisdom, to pass an item to Nurgle behind my back. Inside the item was a record of the secrets of the practice of necromancy, as well as all kinds of insights. She said to Ea that since she had wanted to guide Nurgle, she should give him this item. She would have fulfilled her promise and no longer owed him anything. Amon gave a meaningful, "oh," and said, in that case, can I ask you for a favor as well? If Nurgle wants to help Kella, let him go and tell him what I said. He did not imprint the message into her soul, but leaned over and whispered a few words in Yun Numna's ear. This kind of communication was not like a conversation between gods. Yun Numna was stunned and did not understand. She looked up and asked, what do you mean? Amon leaned over and whispered something in her ear. She could only vaguely hear, how did you carry her to bed? Forget that she is the queen of the underworld, and still think of her as that girl. If you really wanted to, why didn't you do it again? Maybe, it will be solved. If I get beaten up, then I'll get beaten up, and so on and so forth. These were the whispers mortals used to communicate. Yun Numna suddenly understood. She blushed and punched Amon, how can you be so bad? But Amon replied with a smile, is it bad? But I think it's a good thing. Then he whispered, are you going to pass on these words or not? Yun Numna bowed her head and said, pass it on. I will pass it on to Nurgle, as long as you are not angry with me. Chapter 265. Inanna's voice was still weak. But you're obviously unhappy. Can't I feel it? After you became a god, I also fully understood that the so-called curse of Murin was more or less my own doing. Amon shrugged. In that case, what else do you want me to say? Murin, however, suddenly burst into laughter, and her aggrieved look turned into a very happy one. Amon asked puzzledly, what's wrong with you, why are you so happy? Murin blinked and smiled. Of course it's because of you. Remember, you have never been angry in front of me, no matter what I have done, you have never been unhappy, today is the first time. In fact, I also know in my heart that you did it to fulfill your promise to me, and later you were willing to help me out of gratitude. It's not that you don't care about me, but you don't care about my existence. It wasn't until you were unhappy when you heard about it that I was sure that you cared about me, the kind of care I want. Amon looked at her but did not speak. Yun Numna suddenly thought of something and said, and if Adato knows that you want to attack the underworld of Kella, he may use the same method you used to deal with Enril, so you must be careful not to fall into a trap. Even if the gods of Anunnaki want to help you, they can't intervene, but you can ask her for help. Amon also said, who? Murin pinched him. You know the answer but you still ask. Of course it's that gentle, beautiful, capable, and greedy cat of yours. She already has the achievements of the creator. Now that the creator of Anunnaki is missing, and the divine realm has lost its king, she can take advantage of this opportunity to come in. If no one can control her, it will not be a violation of the agreement between the gods, but she can only help you and cannot take the initiative to attack. When Ammon and Artemis appeared side by side in the Garden of Eden, the disciples were startled. The beautiful goddess had curly brown hair that hung down to her waist. Her robe shone with a faint silver light like the moonlight. Her left shoulder was draped with a green shawl, and her right arm was bare with a silver wrist guard. There was a crescent moon mark between her eyebrows. Link, Medanzo, George, Elmar, Gabriel, and Moses were the first to react. Before greeting Ammon, they first bowed to her. Their attitudes were very respectful, and their expressions were very cordial. They were all people who had seen Schrödinger in the past, and they knew that the cat was very arrogant. It was definitely the right thing to salute her first. Although it was Artemis who came, everyone's attitude in front of Ammonius was the same as when they saw the cat back then. In the early years of Link's tribe, the fat, lazy, and greedy cat was like a god, and Elmar, the Ironback King, was more like Schrödinger's little attendant. Later, when Ammon led the army into battle, the cat became both beautiful and majestic, and when the Supreme General and the cat sat together, he always let the cat sit in the main seat, and all his subordinates knew this. The disciples now knew the origin of the goddess Batet. Back then, Schrödinger was the imprisoned goddess Batet, and it was Artemis's re-entry into the human world. This goddess from the Olympian divine clan now had the achievements of the creator. Among all the disciples, Moses's attitude was the most solemn and solemn. He fell to the ground and said, "It was you who separated the Red Sea and allowed me and my people to leave Egypt safely. I have never known how to thank you, and today I finally have the opportunity to salute you." And Seagull's attitude was the most curious. He bowed and said, "I heard from Sylvia that Ammonius left the king to the side and let a cat sit in the main seat to eat, so she challenged Ammonius to a duel. Knowing the cause and effect, I understand that when you were eating, the Hittite king could only be left to the side." Artemis had white teeth and bright eyes, and even her smile seemed to add brightness to the whole Garden of Eden. She greeted every disciple of Ammon, and finally smiled at Elmar and said, "I didn't expect that you, the Ironback, would also become an 8th-level divine emissary, and such a beautiful girl at that." Elmar reverted to her original form and bowed to Ammon as she did in the past. She spoke in the human language, "All of this is thanks to God Ammon and you for saving me on the boat in the flood and bringing me to Link's village. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here today." Back then, Schrödinger had left, but Artemis had returned here and was naturally very happy to meet Ammon's disciples. She looked around the Garden of Eden and said, "This should be the cavemen tribe of the past, but now it has become a beautiful divine palace. Ammon, you really are a man who can create miracles. Your friends and subordinates have now achieved amazing things." Not only had Ammon become a god himself, but the divine emissaries in the Garden of Eden were now also a powerful force. Medanzo, Gabriel, Link, and Hyaming all had 9th-level achievements. Elmar, Rulio, Moses, and George all had the power of origin to 8th-level achievements, and most of these people were quite powerful. Ammon's experience of becoming a god was very special, and the disciples he guided were also very different from ordinary divine emissaries. Before the fall of Enlil, only Gabriel and Medanzo had broken through to the 9th level in the Garden of Eden, and when Ammon returned from Eru, another disciple had broken through. Ammon entered Eru to talk to Ingra, and it did not seem to have been long, but there was too much information exchanged between the gods. It took more than a year for Ammon to recover from the imprinting of the lotus of the Absolute beginning between his eyebrows, and during this time, the disciples were also growing. Ammon, a god who explored and comprehended the power of origin on his own, traveled all over the continent to guide the divine emissaries, and was also the most outstanding talent today. The only regret was the death of John. During this time, the disciples only trained in the Garden of Eden, living a leisurely and comfortable life, and when Ammon returned and gave the order, they all had a mission, ready to follow Ammonius to the underworld of Anunnaki. Especially Medanzo, who had long felt bored and was looking forward to such a thing. In the past, it was others who bullied them, but now with Ammonius leading the team to take the initiative, and with the help of Artemis, it became the most lively event in the history of the Garden of Eden. Artemis was a god of the Olympian divine clan, and it was not easy to invite her, but Aman had a way to contact her. Both of them had left their marks in each other's souls, and they could call each other in eternity, so they could naturally sense each other. If not for this, if Aman wanted to find her, he would have to send someone to the kingdom of Hellas and pray to the statue of Artemis. Artemis accompanied Aman to the Garden of Eden, and at the same time, she analyzed the situation for him. Of course I am willing to help you. According to what you said, the creator of the Anunnaki divine clan is missing, and the main god of the divine realm is gone, and there is no one in charge, so it is not a violation of the agreement between the divine clans for me to enter the realm of Anunnaki. But if you encounter the gods of the Anunnaki, I can only protect you, but not take the initiative to attack them. This agreement cannot be violated. Unless you can lead them out of the divine realm, I can only attack with you. As for attacking the underworld, I am afraid I can only stay by your side to prevent anyone from hurting you, and I can't do anything else. Aman smiled at the time and said, I am already very grateful that you can come. Of course I understand the agreement between the divine clans, and the purpose of inviting you here is not to attack the underworld. I have my own ways to deal with Kela. But there are other gods in the Anunnaki divine clan who hear of this news, and they will definitely take the opportunity to deal with me. I am mainly guarding against people like Adado, the god of storms, and do not want to fall into a trap. Artemis said again, since I am here, of course I will always protect you, and when you go to the underworld, I will also go, but I also want to ask you for a favor. Aman smiled and said, if you have anything to say, just say it. Between you and me, is there a need to talk about who is helping who? Artemis replied, since you have made an agreement with Anira that you will become the king of the Ennead after killing Seth in the future, then I will ask for your consent and ask you to do something for me. Just as you are going to tear down the underworld of Anunnaki, I am going to tear down the underworld of Osiris. Do you agree? Aman was startled and hurriedly explained, I have accepted the spiritual imprint and cultivation knowledge of the founding of the divine clan by Anira, and I also know the importance of the underworld to a divine clan, and its existence is not without reason. The reason why I want to tear down the underworld of Kela is not only because of a personal grudge, but because I have long vowed not to see such an underworld exist. But why do you want to tear down the underworld of Osiris? Do you still hold a grudge for what happened back then? Aren't you free long ago? Artemis, you are no longer Batet, nor are you that cat. Artemis, however, smiled. You have your reasons, and I have mine. Schrödinger is not another part of my endless experience in this life for me, but part of my cultivation as the goddess Artemis. It is truly my experience. I don't necessarily want to tear down the underworld, I just want to end things with Osiris. Osiris has trapped himself in the underworld for many years, trying to break through the achievements of the Creator in this way, but he does not understand that if he does not free himself from this self-imprisonment, he will never be able to break through. He helped Batet with guidance and also had a grudge against him for confinement, so I am not only looking for him to settle the score, but also to help him free himself. It depends on whether he is lucky enough to do so. I only ask you, when the time comes, will you help or not? Aman nodded and said, yes, I will definitely help. If one day I become the king of the Ennead, not only will I allow you to go to the underworld to find trouble with Osiris, but I will also accompany you. Artemis grabbed Aman's arm and shook it happily. You have always been Aman. The two chatted and laughed as they entered the Anunnaki realm and came to the Garden of Eden to gather the disciples to discuss the attack on the underworld. Aman was a supreme general and was proficient in the art of war. Normally, things like this should be done as covertly as possible, and it was best to launch a surprise attack without any warning in advance, so that the other party would be unprepared to break through the underworld in one fell swoop. But this time he did the opposite, not only leaking the news in advance, but also asking Murin to pass it on to the gods in the Anunnaki realm, lest the gods did not know about it. It seemed that he wanted to make the bigger the commotion, the better. The excited Madanzo even asked, if we gather the troops to attack the underworld, should we put up a big flag? Ammonius, what do you think should be written on the flag? Everyone was amused by him, and Link got up and was really about to pull up the flag, but was stopped by Aman with a smile. Just then, Aman heard prayers from the city of Talang. It turned out that the mines at the foot of the Assyrian plateau had been poisoned by a storm. A violent gale swept down from the plateau, sending sand and stones flying everywhere. Many miners were killed and injured, including the guards sent by the city of Taling to guard the mines. Aman immediately relayed the news to Link and the others, frowning and asking, "Aesop just called me, saying that the northern mines have been hit by another storm. This is the 5th time in recent months, and the cumulative casualties have exceeded 200. There has never been a storm in the history of that area. What is going on?" George hurriedly explained, "Of course it's man-made, it's the work of Pruli. The current situation of the city of Enril is already at death's door. They are already at death's door. I've already sent someone to negotiate with Faust, intending to spend a symbolic sum of money to purchase their city-state along with their land, and end the Assyrian Empire's invasion of the plains of Duk with dignity. I did not expect the gods to intervene at this time, encouraging them to continue fighting against the city of Talang." When Aman entered the divine kingdom of Eru to meet with Yila, he tried his best to accept the huge information contained in the lotus of the absolute beginning imprinted on his brow, many of which he still could not comprehend to this day, and it was even more impossible for him to pay attention to matters outside of the divine kingdom of Eru at that time. But during that time, the situation on the plains of Duk was still evolving, and Aesop formulated a Cold War strategy against the city of Enril, taking back the traditional mines of the Duk people and opening up new mines along the foot of the Assyrian plateau. At the same time, he stationed troops to gradually advance from the side and rear of the city of Enril, keeping an eye on the logistical supply line through the Assyrian plateau to the city of Enril, gaining an absolute advantage in terms of strategic posture. If the city of Enril continued to be consumed like this, the Assyrian Empire would lose more and more, and the only option left was to retreat with dignity, which was beneficial to both sides. Aesop also sent messengers to contact Faust at the right time, giving the Assyrian Empire a way out, and was willing to pay a symbolic sum of money to the Assyrian Empire to buy the city of Enril and the land they had opened up. But at this time, Adado, the god of storms, sent down an oracle, calling on the city of Enril to continue fighting against the city of Tolang, and promised in the name of the gods that he would help and protect the city of Enril to achieve victory. The same oracle also came to the capital of the Assyrian Empire, the city of Nineveh. Adado was the son of Enril in the Anunnaki myth, the god of war and storms, and his statue usually stood beside Enril in the side hall. The words of the gods came true, and the mines of Tolang, located behind the city of Enril, were attacked by sudden storms one after another, and even the garrisons guarding the mines were not spared. These garrisons were nominally guards of the mines, but in reality, they were the military forces that monitored and restricted the activities of the city of Enril. It seemed that the gods were helping the city of Enril break the blockade. Although Aman was not there, the divine emissaries in the Garden of Eden also noticed that something was wrong, and in time, they rushed over to check, and found that it was Pruli, the god of storms, who was secretly causing trouble. There were originally 6 divine envoys under Enlil. They were the flame god Kibir, the grey nightmare god Nugus, the heavenly bull god Zhu Xian, the flying bull god Ili, the gale god Pruli, and the dark wolf god Ming Yuyi. Among them, the god of sky and the god of flying bull were both shot down by Gilgamesh, and after the fall of Enril, Minji had left the Anunnaki divine clan, while the god of fire, the god of ashes, and the god of storms had once again accepted Adado's guidance and became his divine emissaries. Adado was originally an emissary under the guidance of Enril, and later became a god that transcended eternal life, known as the god of storms and war. Pruli's training was in the same vein as Adado's, and he was now the most valued by Adado, as he was best at controlling storms. Pruli had come to cause trouble several times, causing casualties in the city of Leng. Madanzo and the others also rushed over to stop him, but they were unable to capture this divine emissary, because there was no time to fight. Pruli should not be the most powerful of the 6, but he was the fastest. With a gust of wind, he would disappear without a trace, and unless it was a god that transcended eternal life, ordinary divine emissaries would not be able to catch up with him. Every time he came out to cause trouble, once he found that Madanzo, Gabriel, and the others had arrived, he would immediately flee, crossing the mountains and flying into the depths of the Saya Plateau, and by the time he caught up, he would be long gone. After all, that was the territory of the Anunnaki divine clan, and Madanzo and the others were also afraid of being ambushed. Besides, Amon was not there, so they did not dare to act on their own, so they could only strengthen their defenses. This time, when Amon returned to the Garden of Eden, he brought Artemis to summon the disciples to meet, but Pruli took the opportunity to do evil again, and the city of Leng suffered the heaviest losses. Madanzo said angrily, "He is courting death." Amon's face became even more furious. Adado is known as the god of storms, and became a god under the guidance of Enlil. Pruli is known as the god of storms, and is a 9th-level divine emissary under the guidance of Enlil. Back then, when Enlil launched the Great Flood to destroy my hometown, he used the means of controlling storms and cloud convection, and I heard that these two guys were also accomplices. Before I could get revenge on them, they dared to come to me. Gabriel drew out his battle axe and stood up. "Ammonius, are you going to kill Pruli now? There is no need for you to do anything, the divine emissaries will naturally be dealt with by the divine emissaries, you just need to block his way." Ammon, however, shook his head with a sneer and said, "If none of you can catch up with him, and he escapes without a trace every time, then his speed, which is his forte, will not be much slower than mine. I'm afraid he is doing this to lure me into chasing him, and he knows that only I can catch up with him. I led Enlil into a trap when I was escaping, and if Adado wants to deal with me, he may use the same method." Chapter 266. 247. Before the storm, Artemis was known as the goddess of moonlight and hunt in the Olympian divine system, and the bow she handed Amon was the goddess of moonlight and hunt's bow, and Amon was also good at archery before he became a god. If one were to say who was the best at archery among the mortals on the continent, it would be Gilgamesh and Queen Samir of Assyria. Amon was not as good as them back then, and the archery he practiced was even imitated and borrowed from the two of them. But now Amon was not only a god, but a series of thrilling encounters had made his strength much stronger than when he had just become a god, and with the arrows shot by this divine bow, the fierce Gale god would not be able to escape. Perhaps even Adado could not have imagined Amon's current strength, and if Adado still thought that he was the god who was chased by Enlil and escaped with injuries before the fall of Enlil, he would suffer greatly. If Adado really sent the fierce Gale god as bait to lure Amon to pursue him, he would not have expected Amon to have Artemis by his side and to have obtained the goddess of moonlight's bow. Amon smiled, took the cape and wrist guard and put them on himself. Although Artemis was slender and fit, her soft shoulders and slender wrists were certainly not as burly as Amon's, but the cape and wrist guard fit Amon perfectly. It could be seen that they were divine artifacts that could change with the body and mind, and not only had the magical use of self-defense, but they could also assist in the performance of divine archery. Amon put away the silver bow and waved. "Moses, Elmar, George, Rulio, the 4 of you stay in the Garden of Eden to guard the house and keep an eye on the movements in Salem. The rest of you, come with me to meet the fierce Gale god. Let's see if he escapes faster than Artemis's divine arrow." Artemis reminded, "Amon, this is your divine arrow, I will not take the initiative to attack an emissary of the Anunnaki divine clan." Amon joked, "Wearing your cape and wrist guards, and using your godly bow to shoot arrows, of course they would carry the power of your godly arrows. I'm afraid that my archery skills are not good enough for such a good godly bow." Madanzo held the key of destiny in his hand and said, "Then hurry up. Don't let that kid escape again before we get there." However, Amon shook his head and said, "No need to rush. If he was really bait for a trap, he wouldn't have escaped until he saw someone chasing after him. We will fly over unhurriedly from the sky. If he is still waiting there after causing trouble and only escapes when he sees me, then there is no doubt that there is an ambush. I don't care what kind of ambush it is, just make sure he doesn't return." Pruli the Gale god was very tall, but from a distance, he looked very short. His body was slender and plump like a ball. When he stirred up a gust of wind, his round belly flapped, like a big toad flying in the sky, looking very funny. People were often amused when they first saw him, and even forgot how dangerous this divine emissary was. It was such a funny flying meatball, surrounded by transparent spiraling wings, which were condensed winds, and only through the refraction of light and shadow could one see the condensed air elemental energy. If one looked at it from the perspective of the control of a single magic, this divine emissary could be called the world's best master of air magic. He could actually change the air elemental armor into a flowing shape, which could be used for attack and defense at any time. With a sweep of his wings of wind, he could cut the hardest rock in the world into pieces, and when the spiraling wings of wind spread out, it was a terrible storm. His control of air elemental magic had reached such a superb level that it was no wonder that he was so fast, and it was easy to hide his tracks in the wind without being discovered. At this moment, the fiercest storm over the mines at the foot of the Saya Plateau had passed. Screams of horror and wails of pain could be heard everywhere. The raging wind had not completely subsided because Proli had not retreated or retracted his attack. He was standing high in the sky, looking in the direction of the city of Salem, and even if a god flew over from afar, as long as they entered the range of the storm he had stirred up, he would be able to detect them immediately through the faint fluctuations of the air elemental energy. He seemed to be enjoying it, and at this moment, Proli felt as if he was the master of heaven and earth, and the life and death of the people wailing in the storm were in his hands. At this moment, the corner of Proli's eye suddenly twitched, and he turned to look southwest. 6 people were flying in the air from afar. It was Amon, Artemis, and the 4 divine emissaries of the Garden of Eden, Medanzo, Gabriel, Link, and Seagull. The 6 of them did not hide themselves, and their speed was neither fast nor slow as they flew straight toward the center of the storm. Proli hesitated for a moment, wondering if he should escape immediately. According to the original plan, if Amon chased after him, he should immediately turn around and fly away, stirring up a gust of wind that would darken the sky, and rely on his speed to cross the barrier-like mountain range of the Saya Plateau to successfully escape. As a god, Amon would surely be able to see this, and if he wanted to catch Proli, he would have to rush at full speed when he discovered him and take him down before he crossed the top of the mountain range. Adado, the god of storms, was lying in ambush behind the distant ridge, driving his flying chariot that could control the 7 winds. The chariot was the most magical flying shuttle in the world, and it was also a divine artifact of the Anunnaki divine clan, and it was extremely powerful. Once Amon chased Proli across the mountain range, Adado would definitely make sure that he would not be able to return. But the current situation was a little strange. Of the 6 people coming from the sky, Amon was flying at the front. Amon had clearly also noticed Proli, but he did not speed up and continued to slowly approach from afar. This did not make sense. Did Amon want to catch up to Proli? Did he think that Proli would wait for him to start a battle? At this speed, Proli would have long since disappeared before he could even get close. Proli planned to escape, but he could not just run away like this. He had to wait for Amon to get to a position where he could launch a chase, but this was not easy to grasp, because Amon was too slow. Proli activated his wings of wind and was ready to go. He kept saying to himself, just a little bit closer, and I'll run immediately, let him think that he can catch up to me at the top of the mountain. Being a bait was not a good job, and it was also a great risk in itself. Back then, Amon had been bait, luring Enril into a trap and eventually being killed by Marduk. Proli was now sent as bait for a very simple reason: he was the fastest among Adado's divine emissaries, and his defense was also the best, which ensured his safety when escaping. Seeing that Amon was approaching from afar, Proli's wings of wind fluttered and was ready to escape. The psychological pressure of standing still and letting a god get so close was too great. No matter what, as long as Amon took one more step forward, he would hurry up and run. At this moment, Amon suddenly stopped in the air. As soon as he stopped, the 5 people following him also stopped. This distance was exactly the space within which Proli could launch a storm attack, and the power of the attacks launched by both sides at such a distance would not be too great. Just as Proli was wondering, God Amon spoke. "You are Proli, the god of winds. It is already a great fortune for you to be able to be guided to join the divine clan and obtain the 9th level of the power of origin. It would be a pity for you to die like this. What is even more unfortunate is that you do not know how to behave yourself. Not only did you commit crimes today, but you also participated in the Great Flood on the plains of Duk back then, right? You were originally an emissary guided by Enril, and now that Enril has fallen, you may still have a chance to live if you repent, but now you have thrown yourself under Adato and continue to commit evil. Adato was also an accomplice of Enril in that Great Flood back then, and no matter where you escape to, I will not let you go. Amon suddenly mentioned the Great Flood back then, which was caused by Enril manipulating the clouds and airflow at high altitudes, and Proli, as the god of winds, of course helped. There were two other gods in the Anunnaki divine clan who had transcended eternal life to assist Enril, namely Adato, the god of storms, and Adad, the weather god. Proli was startled when he heard Amon's words, and then he sensed a powerful aura that seemed to have firmly locked onto him through time and space. When Amon said the last sentence, he reached out and took out a silver battle axe out of thin air and swung it forward. When Proli heard Amon mention the Great Flood, he already knew that Amon would not let him go, and as soon as he saw the aura brought about by the axe swing, he realized that this god wanted to use the spatial fissure to directly flash in front of him. With a strange cry, he flapped his wings of wind and turned to leave. Proli's speed was indeed amazing. With a flap of his wings of wind, he instantly rolled up countless transparent blades and slashed towards Amon in the distance. The sky was a mess of light and shadows, and nothing could be seen clearly, but Proli had already turned into a shadow and shot towards the Saya Plateau in the north. The transparent blades that filled the sky did not stop Amon, and the silver axe turned into a strange arc of light and disappeared, as if it had cut out a spatial fissure. The next moment, the blade of order appeared in place and was taken back by Gabriel, while Amon's figure stepped out and appeared in the place where Proli had just disappeared. If Proli had been a step slower, he would have been directly hit by Amon. Amon appeared through the spatial fissure, but he did not chase after Proli. He stood high in the sky, holding a silver half-moon bow in his hand. The green cloak on his left shoulder fluttered in the wind, and the silver bracer on his right glowed like cold stars. The three divine artifacts were activated at the same time. As soon as he stood still, he drew his bow and shot a faint arrow. There was no real arrow on the bowstring, so this arrow was invisible. It was just an invisible condensation of energy. It passed through the storm that filled the sky and chased after him like a bolt of lightning. Proli, who was fleeing, felt a chill in his heart. He never expected God Amon to be so powerful. The bow in his hand was unbelievably magical. Even Adato couldn't shoot an arrow like that. This was an invisible arrow that ignored the obstruction of the storm. It had caught up to him from such a long distance, and it contained such powerful energy. Proli had two choices. One was to turn around and block the arrow. He could take it, but that would mean that he had to stop running. Once he lost speed, it would be easy for Ammonius to stop him at the foot of the plateau. At this moment, he could only go all out. He made the second choice, which was to rely on his powerful defensive ability to block the arrow and fly to the top of the plateau at the same speed. When the arrow hit the wings of wind, the storm in the sky instantly stopped, and the wings of wind around Proli were shattered. Then there was a loud bang and an echo. A large part of the cliff near the top of the mountain collapsed, and countless boulders fell. Proli had not been pierced by the arrow. The arrow had shattered the protection of the wind wings, and the resulting shockwave had created a huge impact. It was as if a giant hammer had smashed into a cliff. This contained both the mystery of the flowing air element transferring the energy impact, and also the brilliant spatial magic. Proli's defensive ability was indeed strong. However, the god of wind only managed to prevent himself from being pierced on the spot. He let out a long hiss and spat out a stream of blood mist. His flying body rushed over the mountain peak due to inertia, and then fell from the sky with bared fangs and brandished claws. Proli was seriously injured and could not control his body, and if no one had caught him on the other side of the mountain, the god of the fierce gale would have fallen to his death on the spot, not to mention continuing to escape. Amon shot Proli by surprise, and as long as he caught up and shot another arrow, Proli would definitely die. The divine emissary had no power to protect himself for the time being. The arrow was indeed a beautiful shot, and the disciples behind him cheered in unison, but Aman did not even look at it, put away the silver bow, turned around and said, let's go back to Salem. The 6 people who flew in the air left without any hesitation, and did not even ask about Prali's life or death on the other side of the mountain. If there was no one on the other side of the mountain to rescue Prali, he would definitely fall to his death, and there was no need to look at him. If someone on the other side of the mountain rescued Prali, it was clear that it was an ambush, and Aman would not bother to chase after him. Of course, there was an ambush on the other side of the mountain, and it was not just one person. There were 2 gods and 6 9th-level divine emissaries, including the god of fire, Kibir, and the god of ashes, Nugus. In the middle were the 2 gods, Adado, the god of storm and war, and Adad, the god of weather and misfortune. The names of these 2 gods were very similar, but in fact, they were both given by Enlil, and they both became gods under the guidance of Enlil. They also heard what Aman said to Prali before he shot the arrow. Adado drove the chariot and said to Adad, did you hear that? Aman still remembers the great flood back then. When Enlil started the flood, we all participated. Now that he has become a god and colluded with Marduk to kill Enlil, there is no way he will let us go. Adad nodded with a sullen face. I heard it. It was right to come here today. Let Aman fall here and eliminate any future troubles. It's a pity that Nergal refused to come to help. What is he waiting for? Adado snorted coldly. That guy told me that he would only help when Aman attacks the underworld. But he didn't think about it. If we don't gather our strength and let Aman take us down one by one, who will help him protect the underworld? It doesn't matter if he doesn't come. With our current strength, even without a trap, we are enough to kill Aman. Before he finished speaking, there was a long hiss of pain, and the seriously injured Prali flew over the top of the mountain and fell down, looking as if he had been thrown over after being beaten up. Even with Prali's speed and defense, he almost lost his life before he even flew over the top of the mountain, surprising everyone who was lying in ambush here. A gust of wind wrapped around Prali's figure and sent the unconscious divine emissary to the dense forest on the mountainside to lie down for the time being. Everyone was waiting nervously for Ammonius to rush over the top of the mountain in pursuit, but there was no movement on the other side of the mountain. Adado was the first to realize that something was wrong and urged the storm chariot to rise into the sky, just in time to see Aman and the others flying towards the city of Salem without even looking back. Adad also flew into the sky and said through gritted teeth, it seems that Aman already knew that there was an ambush on the plateau, and deliberately shot this arrow without giving chase, clearly to humiliate us. The ash god Nugus cautiously reminded, dear gods, Prali did not succeed in escaping. This arrow of Aman's is much stronger than before. Adado narrowed his eyes and said, his strength is indeed beyond my original estimation, but even so, he is no match for me. I have the storm chariot and the latest secret weapon. Even Enlil back then may not be stronger than I am now. The fact that he doesn't dare to chase over the mountains shows his cowardice. Adad also shouted, I have already said, with our strength, why should we be afraid of him? Before, we didn't know where he went, so we set up a trap for Prali to lure him out, but now that we know he is there, we might as well fight. Adado nodded with a gloomy face. Well, since he is not coming, we will go. Let all the people of Salem pay for their gods. While the 2 gods spoke, a swirling airflow rolled up on the plateau, and the clouds gradually gathered, becoming lower and thicker, surging and rolling, presenting a terrifying scene. There were traces of lightning in the dark clouds accompanied by the sound of thunder, and another huge storm with the aura of destruction was forming, reminding one of the signs before the arrival of the great flood that destroyed the town of Duk many years ago. The people of Salem had received an urgent oracle from Ammonius, ordering everyone to return to the city and prepare for a storm. Aman had learned from Murin that Enlil had driven the storm chariot to manipulate the airflow at high altitudes to trigger that great flood, and his accomplices were 2 gods and an emissary, namely Adado, Adad, and Prali. The storm chariot was Adado's divine weapon, and after being refined by many Anunnaki gods, it was extremely powerful, and the latest news from the Anunnaki divine kingdom was that Adado had also obtained a secret weapon, which was unimaginably magical. The news that Amon was going to attack the underworld of Queen Kella caused a dispute among the Anunnaki gods. Some gods stayed out of it, some gods, such as Murin, supported Amon in their hearts, but it was not convenient for them to help him directly, and some gods were ready to destroy Amon. Chapter 267. Rumble. The heavens and earth shook. An incomparably loud sound reverberated in all directions, causing the air to churn like boiling water. This scene was incomparably shocking. Finally, after nearly a minute of the mixed red and blue waves, it slowly weakened. Then, it slowly faded, and after 10 seconds, it completely disappeared. At this moment, the top of the red rocky mountain had changed greatly. The houses that belonged to the Windchaser bandits seemed to have been ravaged by a terrifying hurricane. All the houses collapsed, and some were even directly shattered by the terrifying power, turning into countless pieces of powder that scattered in the surroundings. Most of the bandits of the Windchaser bandits, who could not dodge in time or were not strong enough, were also affected by the aftermath of this energy. Their bodies were shaken into powder, turning into countless pieces of flesh and blood. It was incomparably miserable. At the top of the red rocky mountain, there was a lingering afterglow and a thick smell of blood that could not be dispelled. No. The eyes of the bloody butcher, who was being besieged, almost exploded. The Windchaser bandits were finished. The 2 vice leaders were dead. Even if he could survive, the headquarters of the Windchaser bandits were destroyed, and most of his subordinates were dead. Those who did not die were probably scared out of their wits, and were of no use. The Windchaser bandits were the result of his decades of hard work. How much suffering, how many injuries, how many times he had been on the verge of death, to forge the Windchaser bandits of today. But now, it was destroyed. Everything was destroyed. The bloody butcher only felt that he was about to go completely crazy. However, no matter whether he was crazy or not, under the joint attack of the Blood Flame Steel Demon, the Frost Bone Dragon, Gerald, and the Ice-Fire Twin-Headed Flying Dragon, it was already very good for him to not die, let alone counterattack. Because of the continuous attacks of the Blood Flame Steel Demon, the Bloody Butcher's defense time and time again was shaken. His body had long been injured internally, and blood kept spurting out from his mouth. He was getting weaker and weaker. Oh, he's actually still alive. Tang Fan revealed a surprised expression, looking at the figure in front of him. It was the Ice Demon Swordsman Gurit. Tang Fan could feel that the Ice Demon Swordsman Gurit was still emitting a faint and weak life force, but it was intermittent, like a candle in the wind that could be extinguished at any time. Meanwhile, the Ice Demon Swordsman Gurit was in an extremely miserable state. All the magical equipment on his body, the ice sword, the armor on his body, the gemstone gloves, and everything else had been completely shattered. His body was covered with countless wounds, each like the mouth of a baby. No blood flowed out, because every part of his body showed signs of being burnt by the flames, and was covered with a faint layer of frost. At this time, the Ice Demon Swordsman Gurit's body was also heavily damaged. Some of his bones were even fractured. It could be said that Goulet was only a fine line away from death. As for Gurit, he's still able to float in the air, it's all because of his last remaining wisp of consciousness. It was a subconscious manipulation. A legend rank expert possessed the ability to float in the air, just like a gift. Good, you're still alive. Tang Fan was obviously very happy. They had thought that Gurit was dead for sure. They hadn't expected him to still be alive under that kind of terrifying might, although he wasn't far from death. However, as long as he wasn't completely dead, Tang Fan had a way to save him. Tang Fan's mental strength moved, and immediately, Gurit's broken body flashed and appeared in front of Tang Fan. Tang Fan first took out the Lich's heart and placed it on Gurit's body. The Lich's heart, under the circumstances that it didn't recognize a master, could utilize the recovery speed of the body. Therefore, when it was placed on Gyurit's body, it immediately took effect. Gyurit's broken body recovered at a speed that could be felt, his vitality was also increasing bit by bit, and he was gradually pulled back from the brink of death. As for the Lich's heart recognizing a master, it wasn't that Tang Fan didn't want to. He had tried it in the resentful Soul King's cave in the Concealment Valley, and the result was that Tang Fan's eyebrows kept twitching. That kind of twitching speed almost caused Tang Fan's head to explode. Usually, when the eyebrows twitched, it was a premonition of danger. At that time, the twitching speed and amplitude of the eyebrows had exceeded any other time in the past. Therefore, Tang Fan felt that once the Lich's heart recognized him as a master, it was very likely that a fatal and irresolvable danger would occur. Therefore, Tang Fan restrained the Lich's heart from recognizing a master, and temporarily only used one of the Lich's heart's attributes. The Bloody Butcher was still barely hanging on, and one couldn't help but marvel at his tenacity. Meanwhile, Gyurit's body recovered bit by bit, and his consciousness also returned bit by bit. Very good, you're finally awake. Drink this, it can speed up your recovery. Tang Fan took out a few supergrade healing potions and threw them to Gyurit. Gyurit didn't hesitate at all. He took the potions, opened them, and drank them. His body's recovery speed immediately increased again. After a few minutes, although Gyurit hadn't fully recovered, he had recovered by more than half. You're the one who saved me, Gyurit said in a complicated tone. Of course, you're my subordinate, Tang Fan said with a faint smile. Ice Demon Swordsman Gyurit greets Master. Gyurit's eyes flickered with a strange light. Finally, he knelt in front of Tang Fan. Very good. Tang Fan laughed loudly. You can temporarily recover on the side. We'll talk after I take care of the Bloody Butcher. Immediately, Tang Fan teleported not far away from the Bloody Butcher. What was even more tragic was that at this moment, the duration of the Bloody Butcher's bloodthirsty berserk transformation was over. His body seemed to have shrunk, and his aura was greatly reduced. The side effects of the bloodthirsty berserk transformation had begun to appear. The Bloody Butcher's face began to fill with despair, and then, he became crazy. If you want to kill me, then die with me. The Bloody Butcher roared, and the remaining blood flame battle energy in his body began to gather, intending to self-destruct. Too late. Tang Fan snorted coldly, and immediately after, his mental power moved and bombarded out, immediately dispersing the gathering battle energy of the Bloody Butcher. Immediately after, Tang Fan summoned the bloodthirsty demon spirit. As soon as the bloodthirsty demon spirit appeared, it received Tang Fan's instructions and immediately flew up, activating the bloodthirsty technique. Blood immediately spurted out from the Bloody Butcher's body, and was quickly absorbed by the bloodthirsty demon spirit. Chapter 268. Wherever the fierce battle passed, the plains of Duk became a scene of devastation, and many trees were uprooted. The inland lake was originally a freshwater lake, formed by a cut-off branch of the Euphrates River that flowed through the plains of Duk into the Saya Desert. Due to years of evaporation, the water in the lake was now a little salty, and there was a faint fishy smell in the waves caused by the storm. The battle between Amon and Adado was close to the southern shore of the inland lake, and the storm raged for dozens of miles around, making it impossible for them to get close. Amon had put away his bow and clenched his fists, his whole body covered in a layer of golden light. He punched out, and golden light shot out from the storm with a tsunami-like sound, while Adado controlled the chariots of the seven winds to trap Amon firmly in the center. The battle was evenly matched for the time being. But if the battle continued like this, the situation was very disadvantageous for Amon's side. It seemed that Adado was in an invincible position, and Amon's counterattack could not hurt him at all. It was just that he could not defeat Amon for the time being. Only Adado could see the situation on this side, and he sneered at Madanzo and the others. I can give you a chance to make another choice. Either leave Amon's guidance and escape on your own, and no longer be enemies with the Anunnaki divine clan, or swear loyalty to Adado and me, and become our divine emissaries. This way, you will still have a chance to live, and even become a god. As a god, I have shown enough mercy at this moment. The achievements you have achieved by following Amon is enough to prove your luck and talent, so you have the right to make a deal with me. If you regret it after Amon falls, it will be too late. I don't want you to betray Ammonius, I just want you to swear an oath to make the choice I give you after Ammonius falls. I can choose not to kill you now. A god like Adado and the divine emissaries around him had different habits from Amon and his disciples, or rather, he was a very different kind of god. Adado had transcended eternal life, and Kibir, Nugas, and the others had also achieved the 9th level of endless life. They either had eternal life, or had seemingly endless lifespans and had the hope of becoming gods. The habits of such gods and oracles in solving problems were naturally different from those of the generals and soldiers in the human world. After the battle was decided, they would often reach some kind of agreement in the end, trying to avoid the result of mutual destruction or mutual destruction. Only when they had absolute confidence would they kill the enemy, or only when they had no other choice would they put themselves in danger. The divine emissaries led by Adad had gained the upper hand. If there was no battle on Amon's side, according to the usual habits of the gods, Metatro and the others should have admitted defeat and made an agreement at this time. But they were still fighting, and although they were at a disadvantage, Adado and had to pay the price if they wanted to kill them. The god of fire and the other divine emissaries formed a battle formation around Adado. No one was willing to rush out and take the risk to kill 1 or 2 enemies. The key of fate, the blade of order, and the eye of sealing were not to be trifled with. If they were forced into a corner, they would not underestimate the enemy even if they were seriously injured and unable to recover. None of them wanted to experience what happened to the god of Gale Pruli not long ago. Adado's words were, in a sense, giving both sides a wise choice. If they waited until Adado killed Amon and drove the chariots of the 7 winds over to surround them, it would be too late for Medanzo and the others to escape. It was a pity that he met a group of divine emissaries today. They didn't care about this at all, and continued to fight with all kinds of divine artifacts. At this moment, another person flew over from afar. This person was not an emissary, but a supreme mage of the mortal world. It turned out to be Raphael, who had come from the city of Meso. Before Raphael flew into the battlefield, something suddenly flew towards him in the storm. The supreme mage reached out and caught it, and then heard a message attached to it. It was Amon's words, "Raphael, you are a priest in the army and a supreme mage of the mortal world. Don't fight them in close combat. Stand behind Artemis and blow this horn to help." In a hurry, Amon actually threw a divine artifact to Raphael from dozens of miles away. This was a horn left behind by the lion king Yugalu, a wild bull that had fallen in the battle of the gods. Later, Amon cut off half of the horn tip that the flying bull Shini had refined, and combined these 2 materials to create a divine artifact that was very similar to the horn used in the battle formation. This object was most suitable for priests to use, and blowing it could comfort the soul and soothe pain. It was refined by Amon with the golden light of protection that was fused into his body and mind. There was no time to be long-winded in the battle, so Raphael took the horn and blew it behind Artemis. Although his help could not reverse the situation of the battle, it still lifted the spirits of Medanzo and the others. Invisibly, Medanzo and the others had formed a standard legion battle formation in the sky. Medanzo, Link, and Gabriel used 3 powerful divine artifacts to face the enemy head-on. Moses and Rulio guarded the flanks from the side and rear, and Seagull spread its wings to protect the formation. In the distance behind them, Artemis was equivalent to a priest, activating the gem on the ring to cast a blessing, while Raphael blew the horn to help. When Adad saw another opponent coming, he sneered in the air, "Do the mages of the mortal world also want to intervene in the battle of the gods? Your lowly life is about to be bleak." Raphael's arrival seemed to have angered Adad. As a priest of the Hittite kingdom, his duty was to lead the people to sacrifice to gods like him, but at this moment, he flew into the sky to fight with him. Even the supreme mages of the mortal world had entered the battlefield, and Amon's side had shown most of his trump cards. Presumably, there would not be any more masters. The angry Adad also felt relieved at the same time. With Artemis praying for Madanzo and the others, Adad's best curse magic could not achieve the expected results. He simply changed his tactics. The black light that filled the air turned into whip shadows that filled the sky, and the figure of this god was revealed. The unfolded long whip was like an omnipresent black whirlwind. Adad personally waved the whip at the forefront of the battle formation and attacked with all his might. Madanzo and the others immediately found it difficult to resist and were forced to retreat. Adad shouted, "This is your last chance. I will only ask once, will you?" Before he could finish speaking, a man's wild laughter suddenly came from the raging waves on the inland lake. "Adad, I defeated you in the past, how dare you still be so arrogant?" With the wild laughter, the waves on the surface of the lake suddenly strangely condensed into a surging state, as if turning into undulating quicksand. The mud and sand in the depths of the lake were also swept up by a force and surged out of the water. The mud and sand consolidated together and piled up continuously, condensing into a huge human figure. This was an amazing earth elemental magic. When used to this extent, it was not just the power of one element. It could even give the air currents in the air and the waves in the lake the attribute of the earth element. Together with the mud and gravel that gushed out from the bottom of the lake, they turned into quicksand that rose into the sky and condensed into an elemental giant. This giant stood on the lake, and the arms that it raised were formed from the layers of hard rocks at the bottom of the lake. Its huge fists hit Adad in midair. Adad was taken aback, and then he shouted angrily, "Sis Hui! You cowardly scoundrel! Back then, you summoned the elemental giant to defeat me, but now that I have transcended eternal life, do you still want to repeat the same trick?" Sishue's voice came in the faint wind, but it was unknown where he was. "Why don't you look at where you are? Past the inland lake is the territory of the Scorpion King. Back then, I couldn't kill you because of Enrol's protection, but today you have delivered yourself to me. Transcending eternal life's gods will also fall, and it is your destiny to fall in my hands." The spiraling whip struck the elemental giant's fists like a black thunderbolt. The seemingly indestructible fists and the elemental giant's pair of forearms were instantly shattered, bursting into a cloud of mist and smoke in the air. Even Metatro and Gabriel, who were in front of the battle formation, had to dodge to the sides. But the mist and smoke quickly condensed into the elemental giant's arms, and it continued to punch at Adad in the air. Adad's figure was like a small mosquito in front of this giant. The god roared, "Sis Hui, you have been exiled by the Anunnaki divine clan, and you have not grown at all after so many years. Today, let's settle the grievances of the past. Since you dare to attack me, don't go back." Sishue's voice was laughing, "I have never thought of going back since I came. After so many years, it is indeed time for us to settle things. I was exiled by the Anunnaki divine clan to find the source of divine power in this desolate desert, and I have not been able to transcend for hundreds of years. The result of that battle back then was the shackles in my soul, and today, I will untie the knot in my heart with you. Stand back, let me deal with this god." Madanzo and Gabriel saw the opportunity quickly, and had already flashed to the sides, supporting the elemental giant's flanks. The god of flame and the god of ash rushed towards Madanzo, and Madanzo shouted to Link, "Find a way to separate these two, don't let them join forces." The elemental giant summoned by Sis Hui suddenly appeared when Adad put away the black light and unleashed his long whip, and the formation of both sides was a little chaotic for a moment. Link's eye of sealing turned into a sword light that wrapped around his body, and he rushed towards the god of ash. Seagull swept Link's back with his wings at the right time, and the sword light was mixed with countless sharp feathers, which intercepted the god of ash. Madanzo took the opportunity to wave the key of fate, and a golden light wrapped around the god of flame, and behind him, 24 flaming wings spread out. The god of flame was also covered in flames and fought with him. In addition to the few gods, the battle between the two divine emissaries was the most dazzling in the entire battlefield. Madanzo had long been displeased with the god of flame, and today he had the opportunity to keep a close eye on him. The original formation battle turned into a chaotic battle. The most amazing battle here was of course the battle between Adad and the elemental giant. The god of weather waved his long whip and smashed the elemental giant again and again, but the elemental giant reformed again and again under the summoning of Sisui. In the distance, Artemis only watched the battle and did not continue to cast divine prayers. Whether it was her divine prayers or Adad's divine curses, they were ineffective against this elemental giant. A long time ago, the Scorpion King Sisui and the god of weather Adad were sworn enemies. In the Battle of the Gods that year, the Scorpion King used this method to break Adad's divine curses and defeated him, but Sishue's camp was defeated. Today it seemed to be a repeat of the same trick, but Adad was no longer the divine emissary of the past. Adad also knew Sishue's best method very well. After several unsuccessful attacks, he suddenly shouted, and the sky full of whip shadows gathered into a black hurricane that swept down from the sky in a funnel shape. The elemental giant finally could not hold on, and its huge body made a strange cracking sound. It turned into countless fragments in the hurricane and crashed into the lake. Adad shouted, "Sisui, you are no longer my opponent now. Are you going to escape or show yourself?" The answer to him was a burst of green flames, and a long scorpion tail extended out of the huge wave caused by the shattering of the elemental giant. The tip of the tail flashed with cold light, and the Scorpion King's venom was ignited by friction in the air. This thing could not be touched. Even a god would suffer continuous damage if they were directly burned by the venomous flames. Adad's long whip circled in the air and spread out to disperse the venomous flames. Green sparks burst out in the air with pungent burnt smoke. These flying green sparks were highly toxic, and the other divine emissaries in the chaotic battle had already escaped far away. Only Adad was left in this space. The Scorpion King jumped out of the water in the flying poisonous smoke and came to the sky. He looked extremely terrifying and hideous. His chest was a human shape, but his waist was a huge long-tailed scorpion. The ends of his muscular arms were not fists, but a pair of huge scorpion pincers. He raised his long tail and spewed out venomous flames. The two pincers crisscrossed towards Adad. Seeing the Scorpion King appear, Artemis pointed forward again. The red light from the gem on the ring fell on the giant scorpion, giving him confidence and courage. It made Sishue's mind clearer and reaction sharper to resist the curse magic that Adad was good at. Adad was also known as the god of weather. The thick clouds in the sky were torn apart by his whip, and bolts of lightning fell on Sishue's body. Sisui did not take any other weapons. This mutated giant scorpion demon king's body was his strongest weapon. When he was struck by lightning, his body flashed with dark green flower patterns. The lightning wrapped around his body and turned into traces of electricity. The Scorpion King laughed loudly, "Adad, you are indeed stronger than before. Unfortunately, I'm not afraid of you. If you escape now, I'm afraid it will be too late." Adad sneered, "Don't think that you are fearless just because your talent can restrain my methods. My power is enough to destroy you. When Amon dies, all of you will die." The Scorpion King waved his pincers and scattered Adad's whip into shadows. He said in a disdainful tone, "You have become a god, and you still expect Adad to come back to deal with me. I'll tell you the truth. Among all of you, he is the strongest, and he will be the fastest to die." While the battle was lively, the battle between Amon and Adad was even more intense. The Scorpion King Sisui suddenly appeared to deal with Adad. Adad felt that he could not delay any longer. He had to get rid of Amon as soon as possible. He had already pushed the Chariot of Seven Winds power to the maximum, while Amon had also summoned a pair of wings that hung from the sky. He flapped his wings to resist the storm that Adado had conjured, and the sky was filled with illusory arrows with golden light. Adad had been fighting for a long time without any results. In desperation, he finally used his last resort. The whirling storm suddenly paused, and the sky and earth became suffocatingly quiet. The golden feather arrow shot by Amon's wings was also strangely fixed in the air, slowly disappearing under a strange pressure. This was a power of law that surpassed all magic in the world. It was as if another world had been opened in an instant. Adad was the ruler of this world, and all changes were decided by his will. The god waved his hand on the chariot, and a golden scroll unfurled in the air. The scroll was engraved with dense divine runes. This was the Book of Destiny created by the Anunnaki divine clan's god of creation, but it was not the original item that had fused with the divine kingdom. Instead, it was a projection of the Book of Destiny. It contained Anu's spiritual imprint and cultivation knowledge when he created the divine kingdom. It was similar to the lotus of the absolute beginning that Enlil had imprinted on Amon's forehead. Although Adad had not become a creator yet, once he used the Book of Destiny, he seemed to be able to simulate the laws of creation and even change the flow of energy on the battlefield, rendering Amon's attacks useless. The storm had stopped, but Amon's counterattack did not stop. The golden arrows that flew in front of Adado lost their power as they floated in front of him. Adad laughed. "Amon, it's time for you to die. No one can save you in time." As he spoke, he pressed his arm down, and the illusion of the Book of Destiny had already fully unfolded. It was about to completely suck Amon in. He was right. At this moment, no one could save Amon in time, not even Artemis, who was on the other side of the battlefield. If Amon was sucked into the Book of Destiny, even his soul might not be able to escape, and his body and soul would be completely refined. Just when Adad thought that Amon was about to die, he suddenly heard a low sneer. Amon retracted his wings, and the world became silent. The storm had originally subsided, but at this moment, the silence seemed to have overlapped with another world. Adad could not even hear his own voice, and only Amon's sneer could be heard in his soul. God of storms and war of Anunnaki, if you don't use this move, you may not lose. At least you can escape with that chariot. You have obtained the projection left by Anu in the Book of Destiny and mastered the spiritual imprint and cultivation knowledge of the God of creation, but your own achievements are far from enough. Chapter 269. Those were the last words that Adado, who had attained eternal life, heard, and then everything in the world disappeared, or rather, the god himself disappeared. Amon pointed a finger at the sky, and a lotus of the beginning flew out from his fingertip. The 12 petals were surrounded by 7-colored light, and the flower itself was pure white and flawless. It bloomed in the air and stopped the falling scroll of destiny. The two used the same method, and there was no room for maneuver in this situation. It was a battle of states, and the result was not determined by power. It could be decided in an instant. Adado had thought that this move was his most powerful secret weapon, but it turned out to be the biggest risk he had ever taken in his life. Unfortunately, he had failed in this gamble. The scroll fell into the heart of the flower, and it was like a person returning to their original position. A red sun rose from the heart of the flower, and it kept expanding. Golden divine runes flowed on its surface. Amon couldn't completely fuse with the scroll of destiny, so he could only use the Genesis lotus to swallow it and temporarily contain it. The lotus spun, and Adado only saw a red sun rise and quickly swallow him. It was as if he had entered a world with nothing. He was slowly melting and disappearing, but he couldn't struggle. The storm in the distance suddenly stopped, and golden light spread out. Another red sun exploded, and all the energy waves from the battle disappeared without a trace. It meant that the battle was coming to an end. Adado was overjoyed, thinking that Adado had finally taken care of Amon. He used all his strength to repel Jirishui, and when he looked to the south, he paled in shock. A god floated over on a white lotus with 12 petals. He held a red sun in his left hand, and Adado's 7 winds chariot in his right. Behind this god was a peaceful scene of blue sky and white clouds. There were no signs of the previous battle. The battle had already ended, but the one who came was Amon. He had also taken Adado's chariot, which meant that Adado had died. Adado saw that the situation was bad, and he immediately turned into a black light that wrapped around his body. He turned around and tried to escape. He wanted to run, but it was too late. Amon waved his hand and tossed over a red sun. The golden runes on its surface were still flashing and struggling, forming a pressure that seemed to freeze time and space. Adad's figure flew away, but he didn't leave. The Scorpion King took the opportunity to stretch out its pincers to pierce through the black light and entangle his arms. Its long tail flew out from the top of his head and pierced into the body of this deity with poisonous flames. The gods would not suffer visible injuries like mortals. A massive black light burst apart with the energy of the impact, and even the red sun that Amon had summoned was shaken to the point where it shook unsteadily. The Scorpion King's burly figure stumbled backwards, and Adad's whip fell to the ground. The god was no longer there. Adado and Adad had both died, especially Adado. Even the Book of Destiny that he had obtained had been taken by Amon so that he could refine it in the future. The outcome of the battle had been decided, and it was meaningless for the oracles that followed the two gods to continue fighting. Amon shouted, "Stop!" At the same time, Amon unleashed the Lotus of the Origin, using a powerful coercion to restrict everyone's power. The disciples took the opportunity to retreat from the battle, and the divine emissaries naturally did not dare to attack again. Everyone stopped, except for Madanzo. The key of destiny in his hand was very special, and its attack couldn't be dodged. Before Amon could open his mouth, Madanzo had already stabbed at the god of flame. The poor god of flame, Kibir, didn't react in time and was struck down by a golden light. He fell into the inland lake with a ball of hot flames and was immediately extinguished. Madanzo's move was quite vicious, and he used very little power. He took advantage of this opportunity to strike down the exhausted god of flame, then obediently put away his weapon and retreated behind Amon. Amon turned his head and glanced at Madanzo, but Madanzo lowered his head and didn't speak. Amon then turned to the remaining 5 oracles and said, "Adado and Adad have fallen. As oracles, you can make a choice now. I have no intention of killing you. Whether you continue to fight to the death, or leave the Anunnaki divine clan, or accept another kind of guidance, it's all up to you. As long as you swear not to be my enemy again, you can leave now." Lucayan, one of Adad's subordinates, said, "Ammonius, we are not enemies, and we know that you have never offended Adad. We are only fulfilling a promise by participating in today's battle, because we have accepted Adad's guidance and obtained the power of the origin. The war between the gods is over, and if you no longer hurt us, we will make an oath not to be your enemy again. But we may choose to stay in the Anunnaki divine clan and accept the guidance of other gods." Amon nodded and said, "I have given you the opportunity to choose. As long as you make an oath in the spiritual imprint, you can leave now." One by one, the 4 oracles under Adad swore an oath and left. Only Nugus, the god of ash, remained in place, the aura around him like thick smoke that had not yet burned out. Amon asked again, "Why don't you leave?" Nugus replied in the thick smoke, "I have hurt you before, and even if you are willing to let me go, your disciples may not be willing to let me go. Besides, Madanzo killed my brother Kibir, and I can't just leave with shame and hatred. I want to make a request of you, please allow me to duel with your disciple Madanzo like a warrior on earth." Amon replied indifferently, "I know very well how powerful you are. In the Anunnaki divine clan, your fighting power is second only to the gods, and my disciple Danzo is still not your match. How can I agree to let him die? Do you think I will be more merciful to you?" Nugus added, "Then please give me a chance. When Madanzo thinks he can duel with me, let me duel with him." The 24 wings of fire behind Madanzo spread out again with a bang, and he shouted angrily with the key of destiny in his hand, "I can fight you now." But Amon stopped him in his soul, and then said to Nugus, "If you want to duel with my disciple, you will still be my enemy, and this is not a choice I am giving you. Your so-called bravery is not worthy of my sympathy. Although I am willing to show the mercy of a god, I will not condone the enemy unnecessarily, and I will not let you bargain. Since you have made your choice, accept the fate you have chosen now." As Amon spoke, he waved his hand, and a lotus flew out of his fingertips and rolled back towards Nugus. The thick smoke around Nugus dissipated, and he struggled to resist. He shouted, "Wait!" Amon replied coldly, "It's too late." The lotus locked onto Nugus' figure, making him unable to move. Amon drew the silver moon bow and shot an arrow. Nugus' figure turned into a dazzling flame. The flame was extremely dazzling and then suddenly extinguished, as if it had burned up all its energy in an instant. The god of ashes had really turned into ashes. Amon did not agree to Nugus' request, nor did he let Medanzo take action. Instead, he personally killed the god's messenger. Then he turned to Medanzo and said, "Don't be fooled by the fact that I only used one arrow to kill Nugus just now. It was not easy. I have warned you a long time ago to try not to kill people. If you feel that you have not fought enough, I will give you a mission to kill the injured god of Gale, Pruli. After killing Pruli, you will stay at the highest peak of the mountain range and investigate the movements on the plateau. Wait for our arrival, and then we will attack the underworld together." Metatro obeyed the order and flew off. With a wave of his hand in the air, he collected a few glowing spots from the ashes of the fallen ash god. They looked like crystals that could not be burned in the fire of a furnace. They were rare materials for refining magic artifacts, and Amon had asked him to take them away. Amon also waved his hand in the air and collected the long whip that Adad had dropped. He handed it to Link and said, "You have followed me for as long as Medanzo. He has the key of destiny, but you have never had a suitable artifact. You will be at a disadvantage when you encounter a strong enemy. This whip is the spoil of war. Now it's yours. You are also the successor of Mr. Nietzsche's refining skills. Refine it yourself. This is originally a divine item. If you want to fully exert its power and refine it into your own artifact, I'm afraid you will have to wait until you become a god." Link returned the Eye of Sealing to Amon and took the long whip. He bowed and said, "My god, you are my only god. Even if we can transcend eternal life in the future, we will only be angels." Amon then handed the Chariot of 7 Winds to Artemis and said, "Thank you for your help. This most precious trophy should be my expression of gratitude to you." At this time, the world's most powerful chariot had turned into the size of a palm, floating above Amon's palm and slowly spinning. Artemis did not reach out to take it. She blinked and smiled, "You have given me the most precious trophy, and the other gains have been given to the disciples. You have left nothing for yourself, don't you feel regretful?" Amon smiled and said, "The victory of this battle is my harvest. I don't need other trophies. Besides, I also have my gains, enough for me to gradually digest over the long years." Adado got it, but only mastered a very small part of the mystery. As he spoke, he looked at the red sun held up in the palm of his left hand. The golden divine characters on the surface of the red sun were still appearing, as if struggling to fly away at any time. Artemis waved her hand, and the cloak and bracers strangely returned to her body. The silver moon bow also flew out of Amon's arms out of thin air and was caught by her. She shook her head and said, "I don't want this thing, and there is no need to say thank you between us. If you must thank me, come with me to break through the underworld of Osiris in the future and drive out the underworld king. You have already promised." Amon smiled and said nothing more. He glanced at Hai Ming and seemed to want to give the Chariot of 7 Winds to the disciple, but after thinking about it, he kept it himself. He brought the Chariot of 7 Winds down from the clouds and came to the southern shore of the inland lake. He said to Sishui, who was sitting on the ground, "Thank you for your help. You killed Adado. If you want to keep the Chariot of 7 Winds, please take it." Sishui's final blow destroyed Adado's body and soul, but the last burst of energy when Adado died also shook him far away. He fell on the southern shore of the inland lake and sat on the sparse grass, gasping for breath. The ice scorpion and the fire scorpion appeared beside him. One raised her staff and chanted some incantations to cast a healing spell on the Scorpion King, while the other stood behind him and massaged his muscular shoulders. These two beautiful female scorpions in human form were usually enough to fill the scene, but this kind of treatment was almost like scratching an itch. The effect was negligible, and it was just for show. The Scorpion King's injuries were not light, and if not for the fact that his demonic body had been cultivated for many years, he would have fallen apart by now. It would take a long time for him to slowly recuperate, and even if Amon helped, it would not be of much help. But Girth seemed to be enjoying it, and he opened his mouth to speak loudly, but he coughed a few times involuntarily, and then panted as he replied, "This is not my spoil, but your spoil, God Amon. I have never asked anyone for anything in hundreds of years, so I do not need to thank anyone, but today I want to sincerely express my gratitude to you. Before Adado became a god, he was my sworn enemy. One of the reasons why I would rather choose exile than accept the guidance of the Anunnaki divine clan was that I did not want to see Adado's proud look. Although he achieved transcendence and eternal life, in the end, he still fell by my hands." Ha ha ha. As Siswi spoke, he suddenly looked up to the sky and laughed, and then coughed violently. Amon cast a golden light on him and asked, "How are your injuries?" Siswi waved his hand and said, "I won't die, but I'll have to rest for a few decades. The Chariot of the Seven Winds is most useful in your hands, and don't forget that you still have many powerful enemies. Besides, except for the true gods, it is difficult for ordinary divine emissaries to control this chariot, so keep it for yourself. If you really want to thank me, I would like to make another request of you." Ammonius put away the chariot and replied simply, "Just say what you want." The Scorpion King's expression was a bit cunning. Although Enrol was killed by Marduk, it can also be said that he died by your hands, and Marduk took that opportunity to break through to a higher level and left the Anunnaki divine clan. In addition, the Anunnaki divine clan had just elected a new main god, Adado, and he fell by your hands, so it is still a situation where the gods are without a leader. I gave up the guidance of the divine clan back then because the main gods who controlled the divine clan were all once enemies in the War of the Gods, and now they are all gone, either separated or fallen. All this is because of you, and Ammonius has appeared in the heavenly center continent. I also heard that Allah hopes that you—" At this point, Amon had already interrupted him and said, "If you become a god in the future and hope to be able to enter a certain divine realm, I will naturally be willing to help." The Scorpion King smiled again and shook his head. "Not a certain divine realm, but a divine realm ruled by you. If I have a day of transcendence and eternal life, I will not call myself a god, but a scorpion angel, worshipping you as the only god. But I am not your disciple now, this is just a future agreement, I hope you can agree to it." Amon nodded and said, "Your power is not guided by yourself, and you are not my disciple in the first place. If I can rule a divine clan in the future, and you transcend eternal life, I will naturally be happy to receive you." The Scorpion King slapped his thigh and said, "Okay, it's a deal, thank you for your promise." The soil on the grassland suddenly turned into quicksand and surged up, drowning the figures of Girth and the two beautiful scorpions. The sand dunes then flattened, and the Scorpion King had strangely left. Artemis flew down from the clouds and landed beside Amon, saying, "This scorpion is interesting, much smarter than he looks. When we first met him, his wish was to enjoy his own divine realm, and he even trained a group of poisonous scorpions to form an army, which was a bit like a child's game in the eyes of the gods. Now through you, he has finally understood many of the secrets of the gods, regardless of whether he can transcend eternal life or not, he has left a path in advance." Amon smiled bitterly and said, "It's true that no discord, no concord. I also hope that he can pass the test of fate and the judgment of the end to achieve transcendence and eternal life. In the past, there was always an obstacle in his heart, and no matter how powerful he was, it was difficult to reach the end of the human realm, but now it is a chance to break through." Artemis tilted her head and asked, "No discord, no concord?" "That depends on who the opponent is, and if he meets an opponent like Adad, he will not rest until he is dead. It will not be easy for him to pass the final test, and a powerful bloodline may be an advantage, but in any case, this scorpion will not appear in the desert for the next few decades. The Scorpion King is going to recuperate, and you should also recuperate, just like the last time you became a god. Come with me. The disciples were surprised in unison. Ammonius, are you injured? Ammon looked unscathed. Although he had fought fiercely with Adad for a long time and consumed a lot of magic power, he did not suffer any real damage. No wonder the disciples were surprised. Artemis explained with a smile, what your god Ammon has suffered is not a mortal injury, but the test runs through the beginning and end of his cultivation. For the gods, everything that they do has consequences, and they cannot accumulate to the point where they are ultimately unbearable. You will understand when you transcend eternal life. Ammon replied with a smile, this time, you don't have to accompany me in opening a spacetime in eternity. I'll go heal myself. I still need to verify some of the insights I gained from the Lotus of Absolute Beginning and the Mandate of Destiny scroll. What? Have you already? Another surprised voice came from the sky, and Murin also floated down from the clouds. She wanted to say something just now but stopped. As for what had happened to Ammon, she did not say it in the end. Ammon held her arm and nodded. It can't be considered an achievement. I'm still in a trance, in a state of half-understanding. I need to go to the eternity to think about it and verify it. Chapter 270. 251, The World with Fish. Artemis giggled. I'd better call you Murin. Namna seems to be just a name for Ammon, although I've heard it many times. Murin grabbed Ammon's arm and smiled. At that time, I didn't know you were hiding in his leather pocket, and I didn't expect you to be that cat. In fact, I still prefer to call you Schrödinger, it makes Ammon feel more intimate. Artemis covered her mouth and said, it should be said that you didn't expect that cat to be me, you can call me whatever you like, I'm me anyway. Ammon, I'll go back first. There are still many things to deal with after the battle, and with the devastation outside Salem, I'm afraid I'll have to trouble the guardian goddess, Murin. When you recover from your injuries and want to attack the underworld, don't forget to let me know. Murin reminded, Ammon has already beheaded Adado and obtained the chariots of the 7 winds, Adad has also fallen, and their divine emissaries have all left. If Ammon recovers from his injuries and can comprehend a higher realm of achievement, the attack on the underworld won't actually need your help anymore. Artemis smiled a little mischievously. Even if I don't help, just come and watch the show. Ammon promised me a long time ago. Ammon hurriedly interjected, okay, I'll definitely let you know when the time comes to watch the show. Artemis took her leave, and the disciples in the Garden of Eden bowed to see her off. The goddess of moonlight and the hunt looked back with a smile before leaving, looked at Murin, and then looked at Ammon and said, Ammon, I feel that in the future, your achievements in all aspects may not be inferior to Zeus, the king of Olympus. The battle between the gods was over, and although Ammon had won, the aftermath of the battle in Salem was not small. Where the storm passed through the south and north of the city, all the farms were destroyed, and the crops in the fields were not harvested. Only the fields on the east and west sides were preserved, but it was not to the extent that the entire city would fail this season. The top priority was to quickly mobilize the power of the entire city to rebuild the destroyed farms and plant the crops that could still be harvested back then. This was a very heavy task, and Aesop and the others would be responsible for it. Ammon said to him, Don't worry, I'm the patron saint of this place, and if anything happens, I won't sit by and watch. Murin said to him, Don't worry, I'm the patron saint here, if anything happens, I won't sit by and watch. Ammon once again appeared in the eternal world. The so-called existence was just an abstract concept. The next moment, a lonely space and time appeared in this world. Ammon called back his body and soul. At this moment, he was indeed injured and would need to recuperate in this space-time. This was not a world created by the Creator. It was just a temporary space and time. There was nothing here except for Ammon himself. Artemis had used the same method to heal Ammon, who had just become a god. However, it was the beginning of the quest to verify the Creator's achievement. Otherwise, there would be nothing to talk about. The concept of time and space here was different from that of the human world. After an unknown period of time, besides Ammon, a second and a third thing appeared in this lonely place. They were a primordial lotus under his feet and a blazing red sun in his palm. They were not created by Ammon, but were originally fused with his body and mind and were brought from the human world. On the surface of the red sun, there were golden ribbons of light struggling, and various divine runes appeared on it. It was the scroll of destiny obtained from Adado. Ammon finally had time to concentrate on refining it. The process was not complicated at first, because it contains spiritual imprints and cultivation insights, and many things could be verified with Ra's primordial lotus. But the more he refined it, the more difficult it became to comprehend. The content of higher achievements gradually showed the different feelings of the two gods of creation. Being able to corroborate each other gave Ammon another kind of gain. But no matter how profound the content was, the primordial lotus could not comprehend the cultivation realm, and Ammon could not comprehend the relevant content of the scroll of destiny. Watching the flowing golden divine runes gradually fuse into the red sun, Ammon sighed softly, put away the primordial lotus, and took out the chariot of the seven winds. This artifact could be used at any time, but it had to be refined again in order to be able to freely control it and exert its greatest power. Just then, he suddenly heard a chuckle, looked up, and waved his hand, and another existence merged into the lonely space and time. Artemis appeared in front of him out of thin air, and Ammon smiled. "Why are you here?" Artemis looked at him with a smile. "You didn't expect me to come." "Ammon, I could have guessed that you would come, and only you could find me." Artemis stretched out her hand and said, "Let me also see this chariot of the seven winds, the famous artifact of Anunnaki, and study how to refine it. Maybe it will be very useful in the future when you fight or run for your life." Who would have thought that the majestic Ammonius often ran for his life back then? Ammon also said, "Yes, I always took a cat with me when I ran for my life, and it ran faster than me." Seeing Artemis glaring at him, he smiled again and said, "But it was also often the cat that saved my life." Artemis smiled again, took the chariot of the seven winds and said as she played with it, "You know what? Zeus, the king of the divine realm of Olympus, has heard about you and is very interested in you, a god, and hopes that I can take you into the Olympus divine clan. I have told him that this is unlikely, but he still hopes that I can get closer to you and help you fight against the enemies on the continent." Ammon replied, "The next time you see Zeus, please thank him for my kindness." Artemis, however, sighed softly, "This may not be a good intention, you don't understand Zeus and the Olympus divine clan, your appearance may be to eliminate potential opponents for our divine clan, so Zeus would want me to help you, but this is exactly what I want. Let's not talk about this. This chariot is really amazing. If you merge it with your body and mind, it will truly be a powerful weapon that belongs to you." Ammon shook his head and said, "I want to sacrifice it and erase Adado's imprint, but I don't intend to merge it with my own body and mind, it's just for temporary use. In the future, I will give it to my disciples to refine again, and it may no longer look like a chariot." Artemis glanced at him and said, "I have known you for a long time, and you are indeed different from other gods. I have seen with my own eyes how you comprehend the power of origin on your own. Just as the Scorpion King expects, if you can become a divine clan master in the future, I am afraid you will be different from the Zeus I know, as can be seen from how you handled the chariot of the seven winds." Ammon smiled slightly, "Since they worship me as the only god, what is the difference between keeping this chariot in my own hands and giving it to my disciples to control?" The two studied the mysteries of the chariot of the seven winds in this world with nothing, and Artemis suddenly sighed again and said, "Unfortunately, there is no grilled fish here." Ammon nodded slightly apologetically and said, "I'm sorry, my achievements are not enough, I hope to have this ability in the future." Being able to roast a fish for another god to taste from nothing in the eternity of immortality was not an illusion but a real means. As far as Ammon knew of the gods, only Anare, Anu, Marduk, and Zeus had this ability. They could create a world for other gods to enter and fish a fish from that world. Artemis already had the achievements of the creator, she could create a world of her own, and there could also be fish in that world, but she could not fish it for Ammon. This was the difference between the realms of the gods. And the space and time that Ammon had opened up was only a temporary shelter, and although he could coexist with Artemis, nothing that did not exist in the first place could appear. Artemis was a bit unreasonable, complaining that there were no fish here, but with Schrodinger's temper back then, Ammon would still smile and apologize. Artemis glared at him again and said, "Why have you become so stupid? There are plenty of fish in the world. I'm not talking about fish, I'm talking about the you who roasted fish for a cat." Ammon held the chariot of the 7 winds in one hand and scratched the back of his head with the other and chuckled. The smile of this god was hard to describe, a little shy and even a little honest. The war of the gods had caused the city of Salem to suffer heavy losses, and although the city was not in danger, all the power had to be invested in the reconstruction of the farms outside the city. For the hostile city of Enril, this would have been a perfect opportunity to launch a counterattack and reverse the decline. If they still wanted to make a final struggle and missed this opportunity to take the initiative to attack, there would not be another chance. Although the city of Enril had been at a strategic disadvantage for a while, the Giant Legion had been reorganized and was still fighting, and it was not impossible to start a war at this time. But Faust, who was in charge of the military and political situation, had no intention of fighting against the city of Salem anymore, and the city, from the military and political officials to the ordinary people, was shrouded in a sense of fear and unease. Adato had sent an oracle, and they had seen a destructive storm sweep through the city of Salem with their own eyes, and everything seemed to show that the gods would help them win as promised. On the day that the storm swept towards Salem, all the important figures in Enril came to the shrine under the leadership of Faust to pray and offer sacrifices to the gods. The statue of Enril still stood on the central altar of the main shrine, and whether the god had fallen or not, the believers on earth were still praying to him. There was also one of the most important gods in this sacrificial ceremony, and that was Adato in the side hall. After offering sacrifices to the main god, the people came to the side hall to offer sacrifices to Adato, and this was the real climax. Such a ceremony was of course presided over by Faust, but at this time the supreme mage felt confused. His faith had turned its back on Enril, and in his heart he knew the truth that the god had fallen. But now he suddenly heard an oracle from Adato, to guide them to an impossible victory. The officials of Enril and the generals of the Giant Legion were all rejoicing, and it was as if they could already see the storm destroying the city of Salem, and they were ready to cheer for the gods at any moment. Faust, however, was lost in thought. If Adato did win, it would also be a victory for the city of Enril, and it would also be the glory of Faust, who led the city of Enril. He had mastered how to make himself younger and more handsome, and with such a great achievement, he would become a man blessed by the gods in the eyes of the people. He would return with honor, and his prestige in the empire would be irreplaceable, even surpassing that of Empress Samir, who had just ascended the throne. At that time, he would be able to fulfill his life's ambitions and wishes in the empire according to his own ideas. Wasn't this what he had dreamed of for many years? But Faust did not feel happy, and his soul was even full of uneasiness, because he knew very well that all this was not the blessing of the gods for him, but just a fate that was beyond his control. The sage imperial teacher who presided over the sacrificial ceremony was actually distracted, and at this moment, there was a cry of horror in the shrine. The voice was filled with fear, but it seemed abnormally oppressive. Everyone was frightened, but no one dared to shout out loud. Cracks appeared on the statue of Adato, and the cracks spread like a spider web, becoming densely packed in the blink of an eye, and then with a crash, the statue turned into a pile of scattered rubble on the altar. The people froze on the spot and forgot to pray, staring blankly at the pile of rubble, not knowing what to do. After a long time, those who came back to their senses looked at Faust with pleading eyes. He was the chief high priest of the Asur Empire, the one who represented the people in offering sacrifices to the gods, and also the one who represented the will of the gods in front of the people. Faust, who was tangled in his thoughts, was pulled back to reality. He put down his staff and knelt before the altar, and the voice in his heart sounded like a shout, but also like a prayer. "O Enril, you were once the supreme god in my heart, and everything that your oracle has guided me has led me to betray you. My soul has lost its sustenance, and Satan has given me another kind of guidance. Reason, faith, will, and desire, but I can't tell who is whose servant. It's like trying to see the light in the endless darkness. O Adado, thou didst prophesy at this time, promising to help the city of Enlil to victory and glory, and thy prophecy has left me bewildered. My duty calls me to fight for victory and glory. But you have used your own fall to prove that I can't find the answer, and I can't follow your guidance. O Satan! Where are you? Have you heard my call? It was you who made me younger and more handsome, it was you who told me to realize the ideals in my heart and become the master of my faith, but you didn't tell me what I could be the master of, the meaning of those desires and ideals. He called out to Satan in his heart, but what the people heard was a solemn and stirring hymn from the mouth of this sage state teacher. Faust's voice was solemn and deep, with a soothing power, and the people gradually calmed down. Although there was still a deep uneasiness in their hearts, they were no longer as panicked as before. For some reason, everyone could not help but think of their distant homeland, and the ambition to conquer that they had when they crossed the plateau to the plains of Duk a few years ago had long since been extinguished. Faust stood up at the right time, turned around, and said, I will make a request to the Empress to negotiate with Salem to end the war and let the soldiers return to the Asur Empire. God has given an oracle today, he does not want his statue to be erected here. Was the collapse of Adado's statue such an oracle? Faust's explanation may have been far-fetched, but it was exactly what everyone was thinking at the moment. The oracle that Adado had previously given was to encourage them to continue the attack, but the collapse of the statue now was another sign, and the smart people could vaguely guess what had happened, but no one dared to say it. Faust finally publicly announced his decision to abandon Enril, as if he had been relieved of a heavy burden that he had been carrying for a long time. He breathed a sigh of relief, but he also seemed extremely melancholic. The military and political officials of Enril unanimously supported the sage's decision, and Faust had been secretly calling out to Satan, hoping that the god could answer the many questions in his heart, but he did not get a response. Amon had already gone to the Eternal Realm to heal, so of course he had no mind to pay attention to Faust's call, and the sage seemed to be walking alone in the endless darkness. The imprint that Satan left in his soul seemed to become another Faust talking to himself, who is the servant, and who is the master? You don't have to call me, when I am in your heart, you are me. It was not only Faust who had called out to Amon, but also Madanzo who had been ordered to kill Proli. Adado and Adad led the emissaries to battle, leaving Proli in the dense forest halfway up the plateau, where they set up a simple magic circle to protect him. Proli was currently unable to protect himself, and without the magic circle, even an ordinary beast could kill him. Adado and Adad did not expect that they would not return, and Proli would be left here, but Amon did not forget him. This hastily set up magic circle naturally could not stop Madanzo, and Madanzo found the unconscious Proli. He raised the key of fate and was about to wake him up. But Proli seemed to have sensed it, and opened his eyes. The handsome Madanzo now looked so ferocious and terrifying in his eyes. He shouted in a weak voice, "It's you." Madanzo could stab the key of fate at any time, and he replied coldly, "It's me, Adado and Adad have fallen, and Ammonius has ordered me to take your life." Proli struggled and said, "You are such a noble emissary, and you want to kill a wounded person like me who can't fight back? This is a disgrace, not an honor." Chapter 271. Amon did not answer, nor would he give him an answer, because he had already given the order that Madanzo's golden spear must fall. It all depended on what he was thinking. The head of the archangels in the Garden of Eden recalled the scene when Amon killed Nugus, the ash god. He looked into Proli's eyes and slowly replied, "The weak may be worthy of sympathy, but in the eyes of the gods, all living beings in this world are weak. This has nothing to do with your strength or weakness. You were injured because of the arrow shot by Amon. Just because Amon injured you with an arrow, I can't kill you. This is your shame, and it does not harm my glory." As soon as he finished speaking, a golden light pierced down, and the 9th-level divine emissary Pruli disappeared from the world. After killing Pruli, according to Amon's instructions, Madanzo was to stay at the peak of this mountain range and observe the movements in the Saya Plateau. If there was any movement from the other gods or the direction of the underworld, he was to immediately inform the Garden of Eden and Ammon. If there was nothing, he had to stay here and wait for Ammon's arrival. On this desolate mountain top, Madanzo stayed alone for more than a year, without even someone to chat with. There was no movement from the direction of the Saya Plateau. After the fall of Adado and Adad, the gods of the Anunnaki divine clan seemed to have no intention of finding trouble with Ammon, and even the underworld was silent. Madanzo was bored, and only then did he realize that Ammonius deliberately let him stay here to hone the trace of impetuosity in his temperament. This huge mountain range on the edge of the Saya Plateau had a peak above the snow line, and cold winds blew all year round. Apart from the ice and snow, there was nothing but desolation, and as far as the eye could see were silent and firm rocks. This mountain seemed to be a symbol of stability, and it was imperceptibly reflected in Madanzo's state of mind. When Madanzo finally realized Ammonius' intentions, he also called out and prayed in his heart, "My God, I understand. Even if you let me stay here for another 100 years, I won't be tired of it. But you still need to attack hell, so please hurry up and appear." Madanzo prayed to the rising sun every day. He didn't know if Ammon heard him, but no one answered him. At that time, Ammon was with Artemis and probably had no time for him. Madanzo watched from the plateau. It wasn't as if nothing had happened. He could clearly see what was happening in Enrol City at the foot of the mountain. After Faust received Empress Samir's reply, he sent someone to negotiate with Shaling. He agreed to Aesop's request and was willing to sell Enrol City and its farmland to Shaling at a nominal price. The people in charge of this matter were Usur and Dikairo. These two were not easy to deal with. After several rounds of haggling, it was almost equivalent to buying the city for free. Their attitude seemed to be saying, "Leave if you want." Faust and the others had already made up their minds. Even if the city was given to them for free, they still had to leave. Compared to when the Assyrian Empire first established this city, they now seemed to be in a dejected state. Faust didn't negotiate a price. He only put forward one condition, which Aesop also agreed to. Crossing the plateau to Enrol City was not only the giant legion, but also the slaves captured by the Assyrian Empire in the war, as well as many wandering explorers and unemployed people. Sinek had promised them freedom and land to come here, but now the Assyrian Empire wanted to withdraw from the plains of Duk. The slaves who had obtained freedom were naturally unwilling to leave, and the unemployed people who had cultivated the fields also regarded this place as their home and were unwilling to give it up. Aesop, on the other hand, promised Faust that as long as those who stayed voluntarily, the city of Denurg would retain their land and freedom, as long as they pledged loyalty to the new city. The military and political personnel of the Assyrian Empire, as well as the giant legion, withdrew from the plains of Duk, and Aesop took the opportunity to take over the city of Enrol and the thousands of people they had left behind. Denurg was now no longer a city in the simple sense of the word. Its area of control stretched from the Assyrian Plateau in the north, to the Charcoal Marsh in the east, to the Euphrates Valley in the west, and to the south was the city-state of Mesopotamia established by the Hittite kingdom. It happened to be the new territory that Sinek the Great wanted to open up in his blueprint. Denurg was the center of this territory, and it was equivalent to the capital of this future kingdom. In addition to Enrol City, two auxiliary cities could also be built in the east and west. After the soldiers and civilians returned to Assyria, Faust was the last to leave the city of Enrol. He slowly rose into the sky with his staff in hand, glanced back at the plains of Duk, and then flew over the huge mountains that were like barriers on the edge of the Assyrian plateau. When he flew over the plateau, Madanzo heard a sentence in his soul, "Lonely watcher, you have worked hard. Although you are alone on the desolate plateau, you are guarding the light of hope. And I am in a high position that is respected by thousands, and the heart is the true lonely wilderness." Madanzo was taken aback. It turned out that Faust had already discovered him long ago. This sage of the state was quite capable. It was said that Ammonius had given him another kind of guidance. Faust was originally one of the most powerful mages in the world, and now his means were probably even more profound, but Ammonius did not take him into the Garden of Eden as an official disciple. Madanzo watched Faust leave, still waiting in solitude for the arrival of Amon. The god had really come, but it was not his Ammonius. On this day, when Madanzo prayed to Amon in the face of the rising sun, he looked up only to find that the light had disappeared. He knelt on the cold boulder, and the Assyrian plateau in the north and the plains of Duk in the south had also disappeared from his sight and detection. His surroundings were shrouded in a hazy darkness. He could hear his own heartbeat echoing between the heavens and the earth. Madanzo immediately reacted. He had fallen into a trap, and the attacker was either a god or an emissary more powerful than him. The attacker had used a method that he had never encountered before, very similar to the legendary magic of the dead. He jumped up with the key of destiny in his hand and shouted, "Who is it? Is it Kela's mother?" At the same time, he called out to God Amon in his soul. According to the original plan, Madanzo was here to stand guard. Once he found something unusual, he would have two choices. First, he would rush back to Lem to report, and if he could not get away for a while, he would call Amon. Since the god had sent him here to wait, he should have heard his voice. The call made in the soul was originally inaudible to others, but Madanzo heard the echo of the call in this dim world. "Ammonius, someone suddenly attacked me, and it should be magic of the dead. I am trapped, but I can't see who the opponent is." Hearing this voice, Metatro was startled. It was as if a person had inexplicably shouted something in his heart. Then he heard a voice directly drilling into his ears from a distant place, claiming to be the emissary of Amon. "Madanzo? Are you calling Ammonius? This is the world of the soul, and all voices cannot be concealed." Only then did Madanzo realize the strangeness of the situation. He was still at the top of the mountain, but someone had used some kind of magic to separate this space and time into an environment where the soul could appear. He could not even directly use the power of his bloodline, and all his actions seemed to be fused with the will of the soul. Instead, Madanzo calmed down. If he could not break the opponent's magic, he would not be able to escape. He stood still and asked, "If the voice cannot be concealed, then your voice should not be Kela. Who are you?" The voice replied again, "I am Nergal, the god of the dead of the Anunnaki divine clan." As soon as he heard it was Nergal, Madanzo breathed a sigh of relief. He shook the key of destiny and replied, "So it's you, why are you here first?" As he spoke, he heard the echo again, "It doesn't matter if Nergal is here, he and Ammonius have discussed it." This was originally the voice of Madanzo, but in this strange world, it was tantamount to saying it out loud. Nergal's voice could not be discerned whether he was angry or laughing. "Madanzo, you have not learned how to communicate with a god. In a world like this, do you not know how to dominate your own soul? I have not made any agreement with Amon, and Kela does not want to see me. That is why I have come here to defeat the enemy for her. You have two choices, either be killed by me, or make a deal with me and not follow Amon to attack the underworld." Since Nergal had said so, it meant that he was serious. He was not just putting on a show to help Kela protect the underworld. Seeing that the situation was not good, Madanzo quickly made the first move. Although he did not know where Nergal was, he waved the key of destiny, which emitted a blinding golden light and struck in a random direction. The key of destiny's attack could not be dodged. Nergal could either use his mana to support the space created by divine necromancy, allowing Madanzo to attack again and again, or he could simply show himself. As the golden light shot out, Madanzo felt that the opponent he had met this time was very strange. He could not tell how strong this opponent was, but his methods made him very uncomfortable. The key of destiny was truly swung out, and in the hazy darkness, there was a surge of energy that quickly disappeared. It was like a person throwing a stone with all his strength, and after flying far away, it finally landed on the ground. Or like a person from birth to death, this irreversible process was accelerated in a short period of time. Madanzo could not even tell if this attack had any effect. The gloomy golden light of annihilation swept back, and Madanzo inexplicably felt waves of weakness. The fear in his soul could not be concealed, and his usual awe-inspiring manner was now completely useless. He seemed to see the death of countless living beings, and at the moment of their deaths, all sorts of thoughts turned into attacks. He seemed to see his own death. In this space, all attacks were directly aimed at the soul. Even a 9th-level divine emissary like Madanzo, who had reached the realm of endless life, was actually not eternal, and he also knew that even eternal gods could fall. So what would it be like when he could be killed, and what would he think in his heart? Nergale's attack made Madanzo unable to help but think about these questions, and then a series of questions came between heaven and earth. It was Madanzo's own voice, as if another Madanzo was pestering him. Madanzo waved the key of destiny into a ball of golden light, blocking the invasion of the hazy darkness, and shouted, "Nergale, you should not have attacked me first." At the same time, a rolling echo came, "If you did not attack first and waited for Ammonius to attack the underworld first, the gods of Anunnaki would abide by the oath and not help Ammon. And if you started the battle first, there would be gods who could help Ammon, such as Murin. Doing this is too stupid. Looking at the magic you cast, you can make people unable to hide their thoughts, but why are you not smart at all when you do things?" This was Madanzo's usual style of speaking, saying one sentence with his mouth, but muttering so many things in his heart. When he heard these echoes, he realized that the space here was strange, and then he heard the echo again, "Why am I so long-winded?" At this moment, Madanzo finally understood what Nergale meant by dominating his own soul, just now. Here in this world, the soul would not say anything it did not want to say, and this was a kind of confirmation. It seemed simple, but the realm was extremely profound. So Madanzo no longer said or thought more, just waved the key of destiny and fought with all his might. But Nergale did not show himself, only continuously launching attacks, as if he was testing Madanzo's soul. The golden light emitted by the key of destiny was dazzling, but it could not pierce through the dim fog. Although he could not see the Assyrian plateau where he was, he could feel the desires of many living beings at the moment of their death being awakened, and all kinds of pain, fear, and helplessness were imprinted into Madanzo's soul one after another. Murin had long warned Ammon that if his disciples encountered Nergale, they would definitely be at a disadvantage if they were not careful, and now Madanzo had learned his lesson. Fortunately, this divine emissary was quite strong, and if Nergale did not show himself directly, it would not be easy to take him down in a short period of time. This made things difficult for Madanzo. It was as if his soul was carrying a heavy burden, and he had to keep moving, but he could not see the final goal. He had to keep waving the key of destiny, but he could not escape. After an unknown amount of time, Madanzo's voice could be heard again, "Ammonius, are you still not coming? If this goes on, I will die here today. Is this Nergale trying to tire me to death?" Then he shouted, "What does it feel like to be exhausted to death?" If someone was watching from the side, they would feel speechless, or even amused, by this strange battle. What kind of reason was there to shout in the middle of a battle? How was this battle supposed to be fought? At this moment, he suddenly heard Ammon's voice, "Madanzo, we are all level 9 divine emissaries, but there are also differences in realms. In such a situation, each soul has its own master, and you have to unite your various selves to see through this confusion and darkness." When Madanzo heard Ammon's voice, his spirit was lifted. 24 wings of fire spread out from his back, and the wings expanded into 28, then folded back into a pair. The golden edge in his hand pierced forward with light, and he finally saw Nergale standing in the void with his hands behind his back. Opposite of Nergale stood Ammon and Artemis. Ammon heard Madanzo's call, and he had already arrived. All attacks on Madanzo suddenly stopped. Nergale and Ammon looked at each other, looking into each other's eyes, as if an invisible battle had already occurred. After a while, it was Nergale who spoke first. "I stopped you from attacking the underworld, so I will really stop you, so I don't care who takes the initiative to attack. This has nothing to do with the oath of the Pantheon. Ammonius, I want to make a deal with you. If I can defeat you, you will give up. Is that okay?" Ammon nodded. "Of course. If you can defeat me, I will not attack the underworld again. But I won't stand here and let you block my way." My disciples won't interfere in our battle. At this moment, a silver light flew over. Gabriel was the first to arrive at the battlefield, followed by Link and Seagull. Madanzo took the opportunity to put away the key of fate and stood with them. Another long howl came from the horizon, accompanied by a green light. 2 more divine emissaries arrived. It was the dark wolf god Bright Moon Knight and Murin's ex-husband, Dums. Amon and Nergale spoke at the same time. Amon asked, Bright Moon Knight, why are you here? Nergale asked, Dums, why are you here? Bright Moon Knight replied, I am here to help you, and also to help Dums. Dums replied, I am an emissary of the Anunnaki divine clan. The battle between you may have nothing to do with me, but Peloponnes is still in the underworld, and I am here to save her. Nergale said, Bright Moon Knight, you are finally free. Amon said, Demuzid, you finally know what to do. As the 2 gods spoke, they had already begun to move. After becoming a god, Nergale still dressed as a warrior. At this moment, he pulled out the sword at his waist and stabbed at Amon. This stab carried a gust of cold wind, and the darkness that had trapped Madanzo just now strangely condensed on the tip of the sword. Amon swung out the Eye of Sealing to block. The 2 swords collided without making a sound, but it shook the souls of the divine emissaries into a trance, as if countless desires had been imprinted on them. If they had not passed the test of endless arising and ceasing cycle, they would probably have fallen from the clouds at this moment. As soon as the 2 gods fought, a gust of cold wind swept across the Saya Plateau. This wind could not blow up a speck of dust, nor could it blow a blade of grass, but it swept up the aura left behind by the living beings who had passed away on the earth. Nergale's undead magic could not do anything to Amon, and the 2 gods looked like 2 warriors fighting in the air. Artemis stood in the distance with her arms crossed, watching the battle with interest. She had really come to watch the show. If Nergale defeated Amon, Amon would no longer attack the underworld. But Amon did not agree to stay in place and fight. In the fierce battle, he swung his sword to force Nergale back and took the opportunity to escape from the battle, shooting in the direction of the underworld. Nergale hurriedly swept up a gust of cold wind to intercept Amon's figure, and chased after him for another round of fighting. Naturally, it was not easy for Amon to kill Nergale, but it was not difficult for him to escape from the battle. In the battle between the 2, it was clear that Amon had the upper hand, but it became a scene of Amon fighting and running while Nergale followed behind and intercepted him. The disciples followed the 2 gods in the fierce battle, walking and stopping all the way to the underworld. Chapter 272. Invisible winds swept across the Saya Plateau. There seems to be the cries of the undead, but they are not real undead. Those living beings have long passed away and dissipated, and what has been awakened is only the aura they left in this world. The plateau seemed calm and peaceful, but if someone's soul was involved in this fierce battle, they would feel as if they were in hell on earth. This battle lasted for a day and a night, and with Nergale blocking him, Amon fought as he moved, finally arriving in the sky above the underworld. The entrance to Anunnaki's underworld was in a long and narrow valley, and the terrain gradually descended deeper and deeper. The mountain walls were as steep as an axe, and when they reached the deepest part, the cliffs on the left and right closed from above, forming a huge cave entrance. Now that they had reached their destination, Amon no longer dodged elsewhere, and Nergale swung his sword to entangle him, beginning the final fierce battle in the sky. After the 2 gods stood still, Amon waved the Eye of Sealing, and actually cast undead magic in the sky above the underworld. The Eye of Sealing carried a power of annihilation, and it seemed to engulf the aura of the undead, and then disappear without a trace. But in the instant before the aura of the undead disappeared, a scene seemed to appear in Amon's soul. Amon's sword was double-edged, and wherever it swung, it also created a strange space, as if it was another world that overlapped with reality. The countless living beings that had long disappeared seemed to appear in this world again, but upon closer inspection, they were not really the undead that had once died here. This was because Nergal saw Enlil, Adado, Adad, and other gods struggling in the wind and lightning, as if they had stopped in the strange eternal moment before their lives disappeared. Gods like Enlil had achieved transcendence and eternal life, and their deaths were different from the deaths of mortals. Their souls would not enter the underworld, and there would be no undead. However, Aman had displayed such a world in his attack. It was clearly a reflection of his soul, a representation of his vow. On the other side of the blade, a completely different world appeared. Nelkala saw a woman he did not recognize raising her staff high. The god's tear on the staff glowed with a faint golden light. She was so beautiful and holy, standing in the midst of eternal peace. Naturally, Nelkala did not know that this person was Maria. The eye of Sealing flashed past, revealing such a vague world, but there was a boundary between the two sword blades, from which one could see the scenes of the two worlds at the same time, and this boundary itself formed a divine space, which was the human world that everyone was in. What kind of method was this? Everyone was dumbfounded, and Artemis also squinted her eyes in fascination. Opposite Aman, Nelkala's heart was in turmoil. He could more or less see the mystery in it. At this moment, Aman at least had the achievement of a creator, otherwise he would not be able to use undead magic in such a way and evolve a non-existent world projection. The two gods had been fighting for a long time, but there was still no movement from the underworld below the valley. Queen Kella was really stubborn and had not shown up until now. She had said that she did not want to see Nelkala again, but she still did not see him. In the depths of the underworld, in the palace of Kella, the gatekeeper of the underworld, Neti, was saying in a frightened voice, "My queen, do it. Nelkala is no match for Aman, do you want to see him fall? He came to protect the underworld, and you can't let him fight Aman alone outside. You can either fight with him to defeat Aman, or summon him into the underworld." Queen Kella's eyes were also full of shock. She never thought that Aman had the achievement of a creator, and was so proficient in undead magic that Nelkala was no match for him. After a while, she murmured to herself, "The oath of the gods cannot be violated. I said that I would not see him again, so naturally I will not go out to see him. If he escapes into the underworld and I see him, it will not count as me violating the oath." Neti reminded her, "How will he come in?" Queen Kella shouted, "You are the gatekeeper of the underworld, let him in. You have to be careful, if Nelkala falls from the sky, immediately move the boundary of the underworld to bring him in." Neti asked again, "Let him in or bring him in?" Kella finally could not help but let out a shout, "If he comes in, let him in, if he is defeated, bring him in." Neti hurriedly nodded and said, "Understood." As soon as the queen's voice fell, she suddenly closed her eyes, as if she was sensing something in a trance. This was because the battle situation in the sky outside the underworld had changed again. Aman had put away the eye of Sealing and waved golden light with his bare hands to fight Nelkala. The pervading aura was still the world of the undead, but it was also evolving into various forms of the underworld. This was an attack that also regarded Nelkala as an undead that had entered the underworld, attempting to engulf his soul. At first, it was the underworld of Avinakar, and the 7 gates that Aman had passed through back then turned into 7 rounds of attacks that attacked Nelkala. Nelkala stood with his sword and blocked the 7 rounds of attacks. Then the golden light changed and turned into a strange river, unexpectedly becoming the scene of the underworld of Osiris Ennead. A huge scale appeared, as if another Nelkala was swinging his sword. This method may be difficult for others to resist, but Nelkala, who was proficient in undead magic, was able to escape with a wave of his sword. Aman had once been to the underworld of the Anunnaki divine clan, where the souls were imprisoned in confusion until the day when Queen Kella was willing to release them or when they dissipated of their own accord. Aman had also been to the underworld of the Ennead, where the souls there seemed to have relived the course of life, and then left after experiencing a kind of trial similar to an inquisition. Only the spiritual imprint was left to the god of the underworld. Next, Aman waved his palm forward, and the golden light turned into scenes, showing all kinds of information about the underworld that Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva had imprinted into his soul. All the souls that had passed away seemed to enter an instant of eternity in the barren light realm. Then the spiritual world demonstrated by Aman changed again, becoming the scene of the eye of the seal being cut open by the double blades just now. The conscious soul could not leave until it was freed from the test, and the detached soul could choose on its own to live in eternal comfort or to disperse. At this moment, Aman was both attacking and demonstrating. He showed all kinds of forms of soul return, including the underworld that Ksitagarbha Bodhisattva had once shown, as well as his own vow. The disciples were still fascinated by the mystery, but Artemis suddenly shouted, "What are you all waiting for?" The divine emissaries watching the battle came to their senses. Wasn't this the best opportunity to attack the underworld? Dums reacted the fastest, waving his snake staff and turning into a ray of green light that shot into the deep valley. Bright Moon Knight followed closely behind, and the divine emissaries in the Garden of Eden also rushed down. A man in a black robe appeared at the entrance of the cave, like a ghost in the shadows. It was Neti, the gatekeeper of the underworld. Without saying a word, Dums waved his bamboo staff and turned into the phantom of a giant snake, opening its mouth and pouncing. The black robe of Neti's rolled up, and a gust of cold wind engulfed the giant snake. Bright Moon Knight followed up and punched the black robe, dispersing the gust of cold wind. Neti's figure appeared again, and he floated backwards. With a wave of his hands, the shadows of the cliffs on both sides suddenly collapsed, and the huge entrance of the cave mysteriously disappeared. The narrow and long valley ended here, becoming a dead end. At this time, the divine emissaries in the Garden of Eden also arrived. Medanzo shouted, "What the hell is going on? Why is the door gone?" Dums replied, "The underworld has already closed the door and activated the protective array. We can only attack by force, follow me." He flew into the air again, and the bamboo staff in his hand turned into a huge green hammer, which he swung at the cliff. The green hammer hit the cliff, but there was no scene of rocks flying. Instead, there was a ripple of black light on the surface of the cliff, and it was actually unharmed. Ming Yuyi shouted and jumped up. Relying on the strength of his body, he punched the cliff. There was a loud bang, and the fist seemed to hit a huge drum. The cliff seemed to have a strange elasticity, and the huge recoil actually sent Bright Moon Knight flying. Gabriel swung the edge of order. Her axe should be the most suitable to deal with this kind of spatial enchantment. An arc of light cut into the cliff, and the shadow of the cave entrance could be vaguely seen again. But then there was a distortion, and the shadow of the cave that had just appeared disappeared. Link shouted and stepped forward, "Watch me." He whipped the long black whip in his hand so that it was straight as a pen and struck the cliff. There was a violent shock, and the shadow of the cave entrance appeared again, but then there was a ripple of black light, and the cliff returned to its original state. Everyone looked at each other. It seemed that Gabriel's and Link's attacks were the most effective, but they could not break the boundary of the underworld. The underworld was equivalent to a very special divine palace chiseled in the human world by Queen Kella. When its spatial magic array was fully activated, it was not so easy to break through. If one did not know the location in advance, they would not even be able to find the entrance. If this was not the case, Aman would not have needed to build the Garden of Eden for the disciples to live in and concentrate on training. The Garden of Eden was also a divine palace, and its current spatial protective array was not as good as the underworld. Medanzo looked at the key of fate in his hand. Although this divine artifact was mysterious, it was not as useful as the Duk skills that Link displayed on this occasion. He and Seagull looked at each other and shouted at the same time, "Whatever, let's do it at the same time, and blast the underworld open." Who brought attack scrolls? Throw out everything you can. 6 powerful 9th-ranked divine envoys flew up into the sky and attacked the cliff on this side with all kinds of methods. The gloomy wind that pervaded the valley had long been swept away, and all kinds of energy explosions and rumbling noises could be heard from time to time. Neti closed the door and activated the space protection formation of the Mansion of the Dead to resist the attack. The 6 oracles outside attacked unscrupulously. Even a deity could not withstand their attacks. If it were any other place, the mountains would have collapsed. However, the steep cliff remained intact despite the rumbling and tremors. But any spatial protective array had a limit, and the power of its protection was related to the master of the array. The 6 emissaries naturally knew that under the relentless attack, Nettie would collapse sooner or later. Wherever the black light spread, rocks began to fall. If this continued, as long as Madanzo and the others persevered, the boundary of the underworld would be broken sooner or later. Dums exclaimed in surprise, "There's hope, continue to attack, and we will be able to open the first door of the underworld." At this moment, the emissaries heard a sneer, "Dream on. If the underworld was so easy to break, why would the gods build a divine palace in the human world?" Then the valley became deathly silent. All kinds of attacks hit the cliff, and not even the echoes could be heard. Only the various energy waves were annihilated and reflected silently. Queen Kella made her move. She operated the protective array of the underworld, which was different from a direct battle. Even if she did not fight back, Madanzo and the others would not be able to open the door of the underworld even if they spent a year and a half. Attacking the underworld required Ammonius, and it would not be done in a day. But the divine emissaries did not stop. Although their attacks did not seem to have any effect, at least they achieved one goal, and that was to restrain Kella so that she could not leave the underworld to help Nergale. It all depended on the final outcome of the battle between the 2 gods in the sky. The battle in the deep valley was lively, and the fierce battle between Ammon and Nergale in the sky had also reached its climax. Ammon waved the golden light to launch layers of attacks, which also displayed all kinds of wonderful world reflections, as if to tell Nergale something, and at the same time to confirm something in his own soul. Queen Kella in the underworld must have seen it clearly, and Artemis, who was watching the battle from a distance, had a look of amazement on her face, and there was also some doubt in her amazement. Undead magic was a very special inheritance, and Ammon not only knew this kind of magic very well, but also knew the structure of the underworld like the back of his hand. He was familiar with the underworld of different divine systems, and also showed the soul world that had never appeared before. What was Ammon's vow? Was he going to become a god of the underworld? Never heard of it. He did not seek confirmation from this path at all. If Hades, the king of the underworld of the Olympian divine system, saw this scene, he would definitely be more interested in Ammon. Artemis was in deep thought, but suddenly her expression changed, and she shouted, "Be careful, Ammon, the boundary of the underworld is about to open." The boundary of the underworld showed signs of shaking, but it was not blasted open by Madanzo and the other divine emissaries, nor was it opened by Queen Kella herself. Instead, a pervasive, irresistible force quietly appeared between heaven and earth, as if it was calling to the depths of the underworld. This force caused the divine emissaries to feel an uncontrollable fear in their hearts, and they all stopped fighting and retreated to the distance. The 2 gods who were fighting fiercely in the sky also suddenly separated and floated far away. Just above the place where they had just fought, a huge gray vortex appeared strangely, as if it extended from infinity to the human world and tore a crack in it. A black bolt of lightning struck down silently, ignoring the barrier of the underworld and striking directly into the depths of the ground. Then a figure wrapped in a long dress, wearing a rose crown and long hair fluttering in the wind, appeared in the sky. It was Peloponnes. Peloponnes was not good at fighting among the divine emissaries of the Anunnaki divine system, but was regarded as the person closest to the gods. Ammon was not surprised at all that she could face the final test, but he did not expect it to happen at this time and place. Well, back then, Ammon also felt the irresistible call of power in the underworld of Osiris, and Osiris used his great magic power in time to move Ammon out of the underworld. Kella could have done the same, but she was operating a large formation to resist the attacks of several divine emissaries and sealed off the entire underworld. As a result, the black lightning directly pierced through the boundary of the underworld. From a distance, Dums saw Peloponnes flying into the sky and being entangled by the terrible lightning. He shouted and waved his bamboo staff and rushed over, the bamboo staff turning into a green light in an attempt to cover Peloponnes's figure. At this time, a golden light flashed, and Amon stood in front of Dums, slapped his palm on his shoulder and said, "That is the test of fate, the judgment of the end of the world, the final test of human achievement, no one else can help. It is too late for you to give her the bamboo staff now, no one, not even the gods, can get close to her, she can only rely on herself to pass." Peloponnes's figure danced in the lightning, petals flying out of the crown to block every attack. The petals became denser and denser like flying rain, but the forks of the lightning became denser and denser, and the petals withered and disappeared in the air. The rose on the crown also lost its tender color, and one of the 5 petals quietly withered and fell. Not long after, a second petal fell. Everyone could only watch. Amon frowned, put his hand on Dum's shoulder and subconsciously squeezed, almost crushing the divine emissary's bones. And Dums even forgot the pain, opened his mouth wide and looked at the sky. From Amon's experience, the final test that Peloponnes was facing now was much weaker than the one he experienced when he became a god, but it was still amazing. On the other hand, the attacks that Peloponnes endured were much denser and lasted much longer, as if they were testing the means that the divine emissary had used to deal with the various dangerous encounters in the world over the long years of cultivation. Peloponnes was not good at fighting, but as a 9th-level divine emissary, her magic power was naturally not weak, and it was not that she did not have defensive skills. She used the rain of petals to annihilate the attack of the black lightning. If the 5 petals of the rose on the crown all withered, Peloponnes would not be able to resist the lightning anymore. As for the exact situation, only Peloponnes herself knew. Amon did not know how long this test would last. When the 4th petal on the crown withered and fell, the test had lasted more than 10 times longer than what Amon experienced in the past. Peloponnes moved again, she began to sing and dance in the rain of petals, singing a song of praise to the gods, praising the gods for awakening all things in spring, sprouting seeds, blooming flowers, and decorating the earth so beautifully. Chapter 273. As the song and dance continued, the leaves on the crown flew out one by one, merged into the hovering lightning, and turned into a withered yellow color. The 4 petals on the rose that had disappeared strangely grew back, and the tender flower bloomed again in the lightning. Peloponnes really had a trick that she was best at, and she used it at the last moment. As the rose bloomed again, the black lightning gradually retracted, and the goddess also disappeared in the center of the vortex, as if she had gone to an unknown endless distance. Amon suddenly heard Murin's voice, "Peloponnes has transcended eternal life, I'm going to the divine realm to see how she is doing, you should take this opportunity to attack the underworld." Dums, who was still in a daze, suddenly heard Amon say, "Your sister has transcended eternal life and become the goddess of spring and life of the Anunnaki divine clan. Murin has gone to the divine realm to see how she is doing, and it may be a long time before she returns. You can wait in the human world, I hope you can achieve this achievement soon, but the test will not be easy, you have seen it with your own eyes." If other gods heard Amon's words, they would definitely be stunned, because he had inadvertently given Peloponnes the title of a god, which was usually something that only a god of creation could do. Amon did not mean it, but the words that came out of his mouth were very bold. When Dums heard these words in his soul, Amon had already waved the eye of sealing down from the clouds, directly hitting a target that did not seem to exist in midair. It was a node of the underworld's spatial enchantment, which had just been pierced by the black lightning. If Kella wanted to repair it, it would take at least 10 days to half a month, so it was a good opportunity to attack. Medanzo and Gabriel had witnessed the scene of Enkidu's fall, and although they were shocked, they were not stunned, and followed Amon and rushed out. As for the other oracles present, it was the first time for them to witness how a mortal became a god. The shock in their souls was indescribable. They stood there for a long time, unable to react. However, the most intense battle suddenly broke out. The boundary of the underworld could not be restored for the time being. If Amon was allowed to rush in, Kella would not be able to resist. Even if Nergal and Kella joined forces, they would not be a match for Amon and the other divine emissaries present. Nergal's reaction was even faster than Amon's. His figure transformed into a streak of light as he descended, strangely disappearing into the space where the tip of Amon's sword was pointing. He rushed into the mansion of the dead to block Amon's sword. Just as Amon's sword was about to slash down, it was forced back by a huge force. He hurriedly withdrew his sword and shouted, "All of you, retreat quickly." The disciples flew back, but Artemis flew forward and stood beside Amon. Nergal suddenly appeared in the void again. The space where he stood was constantly expanding, and countless invisible shadows emerged. He actually used his last resort, using the gap that appeared in the boundary of the underworld to summon the countless undead imprisoned in the mansion of the dead. These were not the auras left behind by creatures that had disappeared, but the undead that had truly passed away. As long as they could not free themselves from their desires before their death, they would be imprisoned in the mansion of the dead for a long time, serving the Queen of Kela and building her domain of divine power. Nergal continued to summon the undead. These souls did not know that they were dead, and their desires converged into an increasingly powerful spiritual attack that even Amon could not resist. However, even the Underworld King would not use such a method. It was tantamount to suicide, and even the mansion of the dead would be destroyed. Nergal pointed his long sword at Amon, his whole body trembling violently. It was not easy to control the seemingly endless undead. After Peloponnes disappeared, the gray vortex in the sky had already shrunk and closed, but now it slowly rotated and unfolded again. The endless and irresistible power seemed to tear open another crack in the world, and it was aimed directly at Nergal. The test ran from beginning to end, and even the gods had to bear the consequences of their actions. If Nergal really launched such an attack, Amon would not be able to resist it, but it would also be beyond what he could withstand. Even if he could barely activate it, the gray vortex would probably immediately suck him in. Amon summoned the chariot of 7 winds and pulled Artemis into the chariot's protection. Artemis's beautiful face was already pale. She waved her hand and summoned a crescent of light, enveloping herself and Amon. She shouted at Nergal, "Do you want to die? Even if you use this method to defeat Amon, what's the point?" Nergal's voice could not hide the weakness in it. Even if the mansion of the dead is destroyed, it can be rebuilt in the future, and Kela will be safe. Artemis and Amon quietly retreated in the air, and Nergal had already slowly raised his sword. The space that had expanded and spread out just now was shrinking again, and countless undead were gathered at the tip of Nergal's sword. When the circulation of his magic power reached its limit, the sword would slash down. Amon should have admitted defeat. If Nergal completely raised his sword, the situation would be out of control. At this moment, the barrier of the mansion of the dead was completely opened. A figure flew out and hugged Nergal, pulling his arm and shouting, "No, you can't do this." It was hard for mortals to imagine how heavy Nergal's sword was at this moment, and the person who was hugging his waist and pulling his arm was also a god. Nergal's whole body trembled and his hand loosened. He could no longer hold the sword. It left the god's hand and lost the protection of his divine power. Before it landed, it turned into powder. Suddenly, mournful cries came from the plateau, and all the undead lost control. Like a tsunami, they rushed out in all directions and soon disappeared. The undead imprisoned in the mansion of the dead were all released at this moment. This was also a kind of soul attack that could not be controlled. Amon took Artemis and retreated far away. The divine emissaries had long since scattered in all directions. When the tsunami-like undead had dispersed, Kela still stood in the air with Nergal in her arms. The Queen of the Dead had used her divine power to protect her and Nergal. This scene also meant that her mansion of the dead had been destroyed. Kela's eyes were closed and tears were streaming down her face. A god who had transcended eternal life could also cry. This was too strange. Because gods were only an existence that was a fusion of body and soul, they were different from mortals. Even if they were injured, they would not bleed, let alone shed tears. Kela's tears fell on Nergal's chest and strangely fused into his body. There were also teardrops fluttering in the air. Amon stretched out a hand, and the flying teardrops were attracted by a force and turned into a lotus that appeared in the palm of his hand. But Nergal was smiling. He hugged Kella and bowed his head softly. I finally see you. Kella stopped crying, and her voice was slightly trembling. I haven't opened my eyes yet. Nergal replied, you are a god. Gods do not need to open their eyes to see anything, as long as you can see me. Amon coughed and put away the lotus in his palm. You too, you can talk about your own things later. Don't forget that our business is not over yet. Kella suddenly turned around, opened her eyes, and stood in front of Nergal. As you wish, the mansion of the dead has been destroyed. Amon, what else do you want? Amon spread out his hands. I don't want anything. Before I came, I had asked you Namna to tell the gods that my purpose is not to hurt you. I just do not want to see such an underworld exist. Before I became a god, I came to your underworld in search of my father's soul. My father and his people could not free themselves from the memories of a lifetime, so they were imprisoned in the underworld and could not leave. It was I who released them. When I became a god, I made a vow to tear down this underworld and release all the souls. Today, I have done it, and I have fulfilled one of my wishes. Nergal let out a long sigh. Ammonius, I understand why you want to do this, but the underworld is very important to a divine clan. Do you not allow the Anunnaki to exist in the underworld? This request will not be accepted. If you tear down this underworld, another underworld will be built in the future. If you do not allow it, you will be making an enemy of the Anunnaki. Destroying a world but not being able to create another is not an achievement that the gods pursue. Amon actually laughed. Nergal, don't forget that this underworld was not destroyed by me, but by you and Kella. Building another underworld is the achievement that the two of you pursue. When I was fighting with you just now, I have shown all kinds of reflections of the undead world. I wonder if you can resonate with them. The underworld was indeed very important to a divine clan, because it could receive the undead with intelligence in the divine realm, and it was also the most important way for the gods to grasp the truth of the human world. Everyone's soul imprint could not be concealed at the moment of death. Some people might wonder how the gods understood and grasped the true beliefs and beliefs of the human world, but this question was meaningless to the gods, because souls could not be deceived. But the structure of the underworld was also different. Amon had just shown all kinds of reflections of the soul world, some of which he had personally experienced, some of which were shown to him by others, and some of which were just the ideals that he had vowed. Amon did not intend and could not ask the Anunnaki to have no underworld. His words were very clear, he just did not want to see such an underworld. If the Anunnaki divine clan rebuilt that kind of underworld, it was not impossible for another Amon to appear. Before Nergal could speak, Kella understood what he meant. She did not look back, but said to Nergal, to rebuild the underworld, you should become the new underworld king of the Anunnaki divine clan. Nergal replied, you and I can become the new underworld king together. Kella had already expressed her desire to rebuild the underworld, and Nergal said that he and Kella would both be underworld kings of the Anunnaki divine clan. Artemis reminded, either of you can become underworld king, and if you want, you can also rule the underworld together. But only the god of creation can bestow the title of underworld king, which is a form of recognition of the divine clan, so that the undead in the divine realm can be guided into the underworld. Amon smiled. That is a problem, but now Anu is nowhere to be found. I killed the king of creation, fused with the scroll of destiny, and brought people to destroy the underworld. But I do not want to be an enemy of the Anunnaki divine clan, nor can I just treat it as an enemy. In that case, I will solve this problem for Anu for the time being. When Anu comes back, I will explain it to him face to face. As he spoke, Amon stretched out his hand and summoned a lotus of the absolute beginning. A red sun rose from the center of the flower, and a string of golden divine characters flew out from the red sun, which was a fragment of the scroll of destiny. The golden light wrapped around the figures of Nergal and Kella, and a unique mark entered between the eyebrows of the two. The two gods did not resist, apparently accepting Amon's proposal and opened their souls to him. If Amon had malicious intentions, this would be a good opportunity to attack, but the gods naturally kept their word. He had only completed a ceremony for the god of creation, and Nergal would become the lord of the Anunnaki underworld along with Kela. Amon had personally killed a god, Adado, and witnessed another divine emissary, Peloponnes, become a god who transcended eternal life. He had destroyed the underworld of the Anunnaki divine clan, but had brought two gods who had mastered the magic of the dead back together. Together, they rebuilt another underworld. He was changing the world around him, and also creating a world. After doing all this, Kela was still in a daze. Nergal had stepped forward to salute Amon, and when Kela saw him in front of him, he closed his eyes again. Nergal just smiled, turned around, and put his arms around Kela, and the two disappeared into the depths of the valley at the same time. Artemis suddenly let out a long sigh, and Amon turned his head and asked, "Why do you sigh like that?" Artemis looked at him and shook her head gently. The practice of gods is different from that of mortals. Gods who already have eternal life do not actually need to practice anything as long as they can enter a divine realm. You entered the divine realm of Ennead because you killed a king, but obtained Anu's lotus of the absolute beginning, and because you killed another king, you obtained Anu's scroll of destiny. You were outside of the divine clans, but you changed the achievements of the creator of each divine clan. Thus, you changed the underworld of the Anunnaki divine clan. The reason for the gods to break through to a higher level is because of this, and judging from what you have done today, I am afraid that the realm that you can verify is already higher than mine. I am just sighing with emotion. Amon also shook his head gently. It's not good to say that, although I have verified some states of mind, my years of practice are far less long than yours. Artemis smiled bitterly. Amon, how old are you? Although there is no need to calculate the age of the gods, it has only been a short 28 years since you were born. There is no shortage of people in the world who have lived for more than 100 years, but can their experiences and actions compare to yours? My magic power is indeed deeper than yours now, but the realm of the gods is not compared to this. I can't even imagine what kind of god you will become in the future. At least the achievements of Anu and Anu are not difficult for you. Amon smiled. If it's hard to imagine, then don't think about it. When a child is born, no one can imagine what kind of person he will become, we can only look at what he has learned, thought, done, and taken. Compared with the ancient gods of creation like Anu or Anu, I still lack the accumulation of 1,000 years. Artemis blinked and said, even if it is only a 9th-level divine emissary who has passed the test of endless life, the accumulation of his soul and knowledge is beyond imagination, which is the foundation for the achievement of the Creator after transcending eternal life. Although you have not practiced for 1,000 years, you have obtained the lotus of the absolute beginning and the scroll of destiny, which contain the spiritual imprint and cultivation knowledge of Anu and Anu's creation of the divine realm. Amon smiled bitterly. That is just a kind of inheritance. I used to be the guard of the Temple of Isis's archives. The Lotus of the Absolute Beginning and the Scroll of Destiny are like books in the collection to me. The chief high priest of Assyria, Faust, is well-read and unparalleled in his knowledge, but that does not mean that he has the highest achievements. I am the same, I still need to verify the fusion. Artemis grabbed his arm and shook it. So you know what you are going to do, I don't need to remind you again. I just want to ask, when can you take me to find trouble with Osiris? Amon replied, Anura wants me to kill Seth after I become a creator, but I'm not in a hurry now that I've become a creator. I want to verify my own world first, and then kill Seth along the way. I am afraid it will take a while, but this little time is nothing for the gods. Artemis pouted a little playfully, but there was a clear smile in her eyes. She looked at Amon and said, well, I will wait for you, I don't know how long it will take. What kind of surprise will you bring me? Artemis left, and Dums returned to the divine palace of Ea to wait for the return of Peloponnes. The once arrogant 9th-level divine emissary finally learned to be calm in front of Ammonius. Amon's achievements had not only long surpassed his, but even his current realm was beyond his imagination, not to mention what he had done. Dumbs should think about what he should do. Aman did not return to the Garden of Eden with the disciples, but came to the divine palace of the city of Talang. After closing the door in an inner hall, the god called all the disciples to him, and also called the leaders of the people of Talang, Aesop and Joshua, to hold a special meeting. The first words that Aman said were, "I am going to leave, and I do not know how long this will be. It may be many years, and it may be that many people in this city will never see me again." Most of the people in Talang had seen Aman or Ammonius with their own eyes, and there were two meanings of never seeing him again. One was that Aman would never appear in front of them again, and the other was that Aman would not return until these people's lives were over. As for which specific situation it was, the god did not explain. Madanzo reacted the fastest, and immediately asked, "My god, are you going to leave the world to practice the power of the gods?" Don't worry, the Anunnaki divine clan has been dealt with, and we will naturally guard the Garden of Eden and Talang. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.